Hello everybody, welcome back to another stream. Hope you're doing well. So, a bit of news later on tonight. I will share my trailer submission for like the new Elden Ring Return to Grace trailer contest. I had just finished that like 10 minutes ago before going on live on stream. Was a little bit irresponsible, almost forgot to give my dog his medication, but just finished doing that. So other than that, everything's going pretty well. How about you guys? Ryushun, Happy Hep, Without Horns, M. Higgs, Scowleasy, Starling, Mr. Yada, Alicia, Clown, Save Frog, Galaxy Dragon, V-Limit. Hey, we got V-Limit. Yeah, I was wondering if you're going to be able to scope out the competition tonight. Yeah, but welcome on in, everybody. It's nice to have all of you. All right. Scowleasy just beat Armored Core 6, completely flew through the last chapters, and you're perfecting your build. Nice. Did you... When you said beat AC6, do you mean you like your first ending, or you going for that coveted third? Sayfrog just came from Ratatosker's stream, and he was talking about Mesmer being the Glowmite Queen and Radagon's son. Thoughts? Oh man, starting off stream with the heavy hitting questions. So I don't know. Like I do think that could be a legitimate possibility, especially with the text of Miyazaki saying that he's on the same status as the demigods, and there's kind of like this weird status-based thing with Radagon and whatnot. But then again, I could also be of the opinion that Radagon and Marika would be still compatible with the reading of Glowmite Queen plus Radagon, so it's a little bit of a joke perhaps. But yeah, I'm not sure. Like, I know yesterday on stream I was saying I would be more likely to believe that the Godskins could have a great snake connection if I saw some of their spells do like regaining HP on attack. But I did actually forget about the effects of the Godskin Swaddling Cloth, because that does restore HP with consecutive attacks, kind of similarly to that Great Serpent Curved Sword or whatever it's called. And yeah, I might need to think about whether or not the Godskins really should have a great snake connection after all. So, or not, maybe great snake isn't the right word, but like the snake god might be a better one. Hey Boris, nice to see you again. And Mao. All right, Scowleasy got your first ever completion, The Fires of Raven ending. Nice. So how did you enjoy Armored Core 6? I haven't played any of the Armored Cores. I was kind of looking at 6, but I wasn't initially like sold based off of like the trailers and whatnot. I really need to like look at gameplay and see if it'll like really strike my fancy, just because I was just kind of like on the edge, and then there wasn't that really big push following the release of AC6 that made me feel like, okay, I really, really need to play this. So it's just kind of been like, maybe if I get the time to look at it, I will, but yeah. Nice. And V-Limit's on the money with that analysis there. Everyone's the Gek, everyone's Mikola, everyone's Gerb. It all blends together. Cold Dash, welcome to the stream. You said they have a snakeskin hanging in the arena, don't they? If you're talking about the Volcano Manor, sure, but I think you might be talking about Fair Missoula, and I don't think that's a snakeskin. There's like a dead ancient dragon corpse in like the back of the room, but yeah. True Connoisseur, nice to see you again. There's so many numbers and custom options for AC6 combat, so good when you're using something you mesh with. Nice, that's understandable. That kind of gives me the vibes of something like Smash Bros then, in terms of like needing to mesh with the systems to really get it going. For longtime viewers of the stream, it's no surprise that I'm a really big fan of Smash. But what might be the most surprising about that is I didn't really truly fall in love with it until Ultimate, because Ultimate is the one where it finally came out with some characters that I actually really enjoyed the playstyles of. And as much crap as chat might want to give me for this, I would say that my main is Piranha Plant, even though it is probably one of the worst characters objectively speaking about like frame data and coverage options and whatnot. But nonetheless, I'm extremely good with Piranha Plant, and I also really, really like Sephiroth. And I think I'm pretty good with Sephiroth. I do think my plant is better, but they're just got a lot of coverage between the two that it's kind of hard to make fair assessments there. So, no, I don't mean Speeve. Or what's he called? Enderman? Yeah. Cloud also has a friend who mains Piranha Plant or Sephiroth. I can't tell which. You never played Smash yourself. So Smash is like one of the best party games if you don't take it too seriously and are just like goofing around with some pals or like a team of people. And I did enjoy Smash 4. I like to play Cloud, but he just didn't fully click with me like Piranha Plant or Sephiroth. And also in Smash 4, I also played Bowser Jr. quite a bit, just to try to counter a friend's annoying as hell young Link, or Toon Link rather. Mao says, snakes and dragons are have very close connections in mythological settings. You wonder what connections they have in Elden Ring. So It's kind of weird because there's also this third axis in Elden Ring that's related to snails. Like, why the hell are snails like legitimate snakes? I don't entirely know yet. So, broadly speaking, in terms of mythology, snakes tend to be seen as like aligned with evil, to be like mistrusted because they crawl on their bellies, so their bellies are like always close to the earth, and they eat things whole. So in like FromSoft games, they're often very associated with greed and avarice and all that manner of thing because they eat everything whole, I guess. I don't know why that's such a greedy thing. Maybe because like the bones are included, but anyway. Dragons are kind of like the evolution of snakes because they have wings. It shows that they have obtained mastery over heaven and earth. But of course, that's kind of like more of the Western dragon thing with the wings. But Eastern dragons tend to fly. But also, to be fair, like Eastern dragons are also more associated with water because the Eastern dragon mythology, as far as I'm aware, rose up out of being tied and connected to rivers, which kind of makes a lot of sense with the way that many rivers coil, and they could either be temperate or violent depending on the disposition or like the day, the weather, etc. Potentially like unleashing floods. So it's kind of interesting how similar yet different Eastern and Western dragons are in that regard. But so as far as like how that works in Elden Ring, I'm not entirely sure. And now that I'm thinking about it, it would be pretty cool to get like more Eastern style dragons in FromSoft games. I mean, now that we have the Lion Dancer, it's kind of close in some ways, but like I guess the closest that we really get is the Sakura dragon in Sekiro, but that one's kind of more of a gimmick fight and falls a little bit flat for me. Hey, Red Knight Unanticipated, welcome back. You beat Dark Souls 3 for the first time in 17 hours? Damn. Just have the Archdragon Peaks to clear out. Nice. Archdragon Peak is peak, unironically. Anticipated says they have a probably dumb question, but is the Elden Beast a dragon? I don't think that's a dumb question at all, and I think that's a very fair one. So, hold on here. I couldn't think of what the dude is called. And at first I was like Nausicaa. So I do think there's a lot of visual parallels between the Elden Beast and this guy right here. But I don't really know exactly how relevant that's supposed to be and whatnot. And so if the Elden Beast is kind of like this, there might be the possibility that its head got cut off because that kind of like ties into the characterization of this thing. And it might look at one point more draconic. Now, I don't really believe that by any means, but you know, there's something kind of weird going on with the Elden Beast. It certainly breathes fire like a dragon at times, but it also has a lot of other stuff going on for it. So the way that I kind of reconcile my thoughts on whether or not the Elden Beast would be a true dragon would be whether or not life in the lands between just tends to become more draconic, like the more powerful it becomes, which can kind of be corroborated in the way that people who partake in dragon communion eventually transform into worms because they become like bastardized dragons and whatnot. So maybe it's just a natural consequence of having that much power that like the biggest baddest thing tends to resemble a dragon. It's kind of like survival of the fittest, but not. I know that's kind of like a terrible way to phrase that, but I think you guys might be getting at what I'm saying. I hope, and if not, I'm just gonna go lie down and cry. Could the Godskins be the children of the Gek and the Great Serpent? I honestly have no idea. Lucifer-Lilith kind of relationship. Both the Gek and the Serpent oppose the gods. Maybe. Hey, Cat, nice to see you again. Dragons and myths don't breathe fire? Well, if that's the case, like, the myths have definitely been corrupted over time. I'm just gonna, like, blame Disney, I guess. M. Higgs, welcome on in. You immediately thought of that creature from Princess Mononoke as well. When I saw the very first trailer for Elden Ring, well, that's a lie. Not the first trailer, not the 2019 trailer. It might have been the E3. No, E3 2019. What was the second one? Anyway, when I saw like one of the trailers for the first time, and I saw the Regal Ancestor Spirit, I was like, oh my god. This is exactly like the Forest Spirit from Mononoke. I was extremely hyped, and it had like such little screen time. I was like, man, this thing could be like a really big thing, and it could be super cool. And then the game came out, and it was not a really big thing, and it was also not super cool. It was kind of disappointing. With that being said, I still really do enjoy the lore of the Regal Ancestors spirits as far as how they help expand upon the mechanics of Elden Ring, but I do wish there was a little bit more to them with like the surrounding cultures or just having a bit more boss mechanics to not be such an easy kind of pushover boss. Hey Eric, nice to see you again. Okay, so for yesterday's stream, we watched a couple videos, obviously. Those were one by Miss Chalice, which was We Need to Talk About the Godskins, Elden Ring lore. And then only one more, so I spent like a lot of time going off on tangents talking about Miss Chalice's video, because I mean, it's the Godskins. How could you not do that, really? And then following that, we watched Deciphering the Story trailer, Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree lore by Game Plus The Alchemist. And then he was comparing Marika to Griffith throughout that video, and that was a pretty good one. And so today, I have recently learned that a pretty consistent participator in the chat over the past couple weeks or month has been Levelvitlore, and apparently he has a YouTube channel, and I just was not made super aware of that until recently. Or like he said something, but I think it was on stream, and then it kind of like passed me by. But yeah, I did check out his channel, and I figured we could look at I don't believe this is his actual first video.
America's own words.
Wait, let me just go to this and then open his thing. So I don't know how many videos he has. So he has 3 videos. This would be his second one. So his first was Radagon Origin Journey from Slave to God, but that was a little bit long, and I said I wanted to check out the Smotown one, so I elected to check out Regression and Causality because it's kind of a fun topic. I have certain thoughts, and I did go into them in mediocre depth on my last video about the Grace of Old, so I'm curious if Levelvit has any perspectives that will kind of build off of my thoughts on that, or like not build off of my thoughts, but like contribute more to my thoughts on the topic. So yeah, after this video, I would probably show the kind of trailer that I've been spending the past couple weeks trying to make for this stupid Elden Ring contest. That took a lot longer than I was expecting, just because I really had to go back and get a lot of footage, trying to make sure that none of it used any like camera mods, and all of it came from the game. So as I said at the very beginning of the stream, I like just finished it like a half hour ago, not even joking. And then if I had more time, I would have uploaded it before the stream, but since my upload speed is not great anyway, I was like, well, that'll just have to be a post-stream thing, so you guys get a bit of an early sneak peek. And you guys might also be able to provide me some feedback if I needed to change anything before it went live. Mao said, you have some videos you want to talk about the dragons and mythology. I want you to recommend me some. So sure, yeah, you can always do that. I might not always react to just random videos on stream, but the Discord server is the easiest place to just, shoot the poop and share videos and whatnot. So we have a couple different channels for that. We have like the What Are You Watching channel and the channel idea server feedback if you want me to react to something on stream, or even just the general chat can be a good spot if you're just like making a bit of a general conversation there. And then hold on. Hey, 1 star, nice to see you again. Sweet. And Anna Clara MD, welcome on into the stream. An Elden enthusiast, how's it going, my man? How is the video progress going? Or is this a cursed thing to talk about whenever I immediately see you? All right. Oh, damn it. I forgot to respond to all your stuff that you sent me. I'm sorry, man. Like, once the DLC trailer came out, that just really blindsided me. And yeah, you've just been like in a bad spot for me to like actually reply to you in a timely manner. So just ping me. Like, if you ever want me to like give you more detailed feedback, just ping me. I'll try to get to it when I can. And sometimes life happens. Forsaken Bacon. I kind of like that name, like the rhyme with it. If Elden Ring is heavily inspired by Norse mythology, Yggdrasil, runes, and giants, and assuming Marika represents Odin, do you think anything is in relation to the Norns, the three sisters who weave fate? So if you said anything, I would say that I think remembrances and runes themselves being related to memories are a very strong indicator of that idea of fate and memories being etched into the bark of Yggdrasil, with the way that the remembrances are quote unquote hewn into the Erdtree upon like the death of such champions and whatnot. And I substantiate that by saying, because the regal ancestors originally are supposed to have kept their distance from the Erdtree, it's because we kill them that we gain their gold and hew them into the Erdtree. Otherwise, it would never have like gone into the Erdtree on itself, I guess. But as for like the characters of the Norns, I'm not sure. In some ways, I feel like the finger readers might fit that profile image, but it's definitely not the best match by any means. Witchfire. I haven't heard of that. I'll need to check it out. Oh yeah, and Starling says the finger readers. And then 1 star said that American Radagon are similar to Freya in Norse mythology and the sun goddess in Celtic Irish mythology. I don't know a ton about the Celtic Irish mythology, so I'd be interested to learn more about that. All right, so I was hoping Levo would hop in early because I did message him and I was like, hey man, if I checked out your video on stream, would you be in stream tomorrow, and would earlier be better or later? So nonetheless, the show must go on, and hopefully he'll be able to pop in at some point. And so let's go ahead and dive on into Level of It lores. What exactly are the laws of regression and causality? All right, and I do know that this video does have a bit of a disclaimer here, so.
America's own words, I declare mine intent to search the depths of the Golden Order through understanding of the proper way.
All right, that seems a little bit quiet. I'm going to bump it up for you guys.
Our grace is increased. Those blissful early days of blind belief are long past. My comrades, why must ye falter?
I recommend turning on subtitles for this video due to my bad accent. Thank you for your patience and understanding.
No, I definitely appreciate the disclaimer there and going through the effort of including the subs or the closed captions, whatever you want to call them. And as far as like the accents goes, I mean, that's not necessarily like a bad thing. It's just like a factual thing. So I feel bad that you feel like you have a bad accent. It might be thick, but nonetheless, I do want to say that I respect the hell out of like going through this effort, especially if English is not anyone's first language. It's always a bit of a challenge and respectable endeavor to try to make content in a language that is not your mother tongue. So kudos to him. Yeah, you live with it. We try our best to understand if someone's learning. And yeah, I think just having the self-awareness to also include the subs is just kind of like commendable, I suppose.
In this video, I'll finally provide a definitive answer
I didn't realize I turned them off. I thought I turned them on. Okay.
to what the law of regression and law of causality really are. Moreover, I'll do it in simple terms. While we'll touch on some complex topics, I promise that by the end of this video, you will understand the subject so well that you will be able to explain it to your friends effortlessly. My explanation will be definitive, offering a clear conclusion, unlike some of the vague theories you might find on the internet.
Alright, so he's already making some of these bold claims. Here we go.
Have you ever read the law of causality and law of regression spell descriptions? Allow me to read them to you. Incantations of the Golden Order Fundamentalists. One of the key fundamentals. The fundamentalists describe the Golden Order through the powers of regression and causality. Causality is the pull between meanings, that which links all things in a chain of relation.
Alright, so a little bit of feedback for Levo as far as like the content creation goes. I do appreciate like having the item descriptions directly on screen. However, I do think this is kind of blown up a bit too much. Because like some of the text is cut off, which is minor, but even if it wasn't entirely cut off, I think this would still be a bit too big. So a couple things you can do to kind of mitigate that is if you look at some of my like earlier Elden Ring videos, I'm not entirely afraid to just have a little bit of black bars on the sides of the screen and just like keep it more contained to what I would call maybe let's say like the middle third of the screen, maybe the middle half would be better because of the differences between like what viewing methods that the audience might have, because a lot of people might watch some stuff on their phone, so it's always a little bit of a balance of making something too small versus something too big if somebody's like watching it on a TV and then like the text is all like cut off by the YouTube stuff. So another thing you can do is kind of like make your own custom item description UI type stuff. That's what I did in my last video on gold and silver, or even if you just did text on the screen instead of just the actual item stuff. But if you want it to make it look good as well, I mean, it seems like you already understand what cropping is because you had it on. Yeah, you've already cropped it. So if you just like made this a little bit smaller and just up in the very center of the screen, it'd probably be a little bit easier to look at. And so I'm not like trying to criticize a level of it, by the way, guys. I'm just trying to give some constructive feedback so that way they can make their next videos look a little bit smoother. Elden liked Levo's Radagon video. Nice. Nightbot's keeping it real. Thanks, Ding Dong. I appreciate that. Now it feels like I'm insulting you for calling you by your handle.
The key fundamental. The fundamentalists describe the Golden Order through the powers of regression and causality. Causality is the pull between meanings, that which links all things in a chain of relation. And regression.
Oh yeah, just like that. The way that you just had it was pretty good. I would have it extended all the way down to the bottom, because sometimes the B-roll can be a little bit distracting, or have it off to the side so that way people can watch what's going on in the background, and then occasionally look at what you're referencing there.
Is the pull of meaning, that all things yearn eternally to converge.
Actually, like that, it didn't really look too bad at the end there. Yeah, so the other one I felt was too big. This is, slightly big, but it's not nearly as oppressive. Okay. All right, so I'll probably chill off on like the visual stuff for now.
All things yearn eternally to converge. Doesn't that sound confusing? Like chain of relation, pull of meaning? Who is pulling the meanings? And how can meanings be pulled in the first place? What exactly are these meanings? And we have not only a pool of meaning, but we also have a pool between meanings, like two separate laws of nature. What does it even mean? These spells are supposed to help in understanding the Golden Order, not complicate it further. So, why do I find this explanation confusing? I spent about 2 years searching for explanation and have come across many attempts, yet not a single one has satisfied me. To truly grasp what these laws signify, let's start by understanding what they are not. Let me share one of the popular interpretations of the law of causality and regression.
Legitimate Earth. I know I've read something by them before. The name definitely stands out. I don't remember if that's Doogman guy or if that's somebody else.
To really understand this law, let's take 2 examples. For the first example, let's take the prawn eater. Here he is, in Lunia, enjoying his prawns. He converges with all the elements in the lake. He's got a house. There are trees around him, water, and of course, prawns. But the prawn eater has a specific relation with the prawns. Here's where causality comes in. He hunts them, and with them gains his means for his humble survival. Both prawn and prawn eater exist under the law of regression. And prawn eater has an important relationship to the prawns. By hunting and eating them, they have a causal relationship. Simple enough.
I'm going to be real. I feel like that description or that explanation is not so great because it just sounded a bit redundant and tautological in some ways. Did anybody else feel that way, or is that just me? Yeah. I feel like I want to try to like restate it a bit more clearly here, but I feel like Levo might do that right now, so I'll try to give him the chance. Okay, Galaxy Dragon feels the same? Okay.
Yeah, simple, right?
Okay.
And these interpretations aren't incorrect. They do describe.
Yeah. I should have said, like, I don't necessarily think that's wrong, but I don't think it's as clear as it could have been.
What causality is, indeed. They outline causality as we understand it in the real world. If there is an effect, there must be a cause for it. However, many explanations often overlook other aspects, such as the pool of meanings and the chain of relation. Most just read off a real-life definition of causality and consider the job done. But there is a huge problem with that approach. If the law of causality merely represents cause and effects, so in the time before the Golden Order there were no cause and effects? Did events just happen randomly without any reason? It's frequently overlooked that these 2 laws specifically describe the Golden Order.
So yeah, I definitely enjoy this line of questioning that Levo is bringing up right now. So I would expect that those metaphysical laws existed to some degree, but I don't think they were necessarily representative of order. Just like how, even though the Golden Order has gotten rid of destined death, there are still other facets of death within the Lands Between, and we need to look no further than Topps just dying of emptying out his brain so he could learn new spells, I guess. I don't know what's going on with Topps, man. So anyway, Skate Legends, welcome into the stream. And Methoda, nice to see you again. Calling something redundant and tautological is a bit redundant and tautological? No, you. Do I think Horlu was part of the Kaiden before joining Mythmerica? I don't know. Just because like the Kaiden almost seem more related to the consecrated snowfields than Badlands. And their culture seems similar but a little bit different, but there's just not enough to say.
This implies that in the previous ages, these rules did not apply. Moreover, the Golden Order isn't even that ancient. It was established after Godfrey's age, and after banishment from the Lands Between.
Alright, so he's on my side. I got an ally until he says something that I disagree with. So yeah, no, that'll actually be really helpful information, trying to determine when he believes the Golden Order was created. So if it's after Godfrey, that could mean after the Age of Ancients more specifically, or when Radagon ascends as Elden Lord. One star says, maybe there wasn't cause and effect because everything was in harmony, similar to the Age of Songs and Tolkien's timeline. I'm not familiar enough with like the deep works of Tolkien to understand that, but that sounds very interesting.
Or we encounter explanation like this, where regression is described as a tendency to unify, while causality is seen as its opposite, a drive to be apart. It's the difference between pulling apart and pulling together to make new orders. For me, this sounds very implausible. Why would the Golden Order, the epitome of perfection, meant to be eternal and never replaced by another, be governed by the laws that entail creating new orders? That makes no sense.
And I think that's one of the most important questions we should have about the Golden Order, and this might tie into how one feels the Golden Order should have been integrated in the timeline. Like, if the Golden Order is supposed to be 100% perfect, then why does the Greater Will continue to create Empyreans either in the form of Ranni or Micha and Malenia? And Ranni might be hand-woven away if you think the Golden Order came later, but I think even if you believe the Golden Order started with Radagon, then you're still kind of out of luck with the additions of Micha and Malenia.
Could there be a more pitiable comedy? Look at it. The culmination of perfection. Burning before our very eyes.
Okay, I hope you understand why I think that there is no satisfying answer to what really are these laws. Let's start.
That's funny as hell, because at the beginning of the video, he's like, I'm going to tell you, and you're going to know for real. And then he's like, I don't think there's a good answer. I feel like he just kind of shot himself in the foot a little bit, but this is kind of funny enough to me that it doesn't bother me.
The explanation. And of course, we'll start with word semantic and Japanese translation. The translation itself is fairly accurate, but there is no such thing as perfect translation. We cannot just convert from Japanese to English without additional interpretation or assumption. It will sound complicated at first, but it will all make sense, I promise. So what really is developers' intent by wording such as pool of meanings? In this context, meaning, imi, refers to anything that has some significance. Me, you, other peoples, great runes, Erdtree, Leontel, stars, basically it means all things. Also, in the regression item description, they double down on this, saying that this applies to all things. And pull is inryoku, is some kind of force. Literally it can be translated as gravitational force, and also refers to a strong attraction or appeal that someone or something possesses. So
Damn it, I was muted. Okay, so what I was saying was Emi. Okay, yeah. So, damn it, now I wonder if there's like some additional meaning to Emi that I don't necessarily know off the top of my head. And then I was comparing that to this is kind of like one of the weaknesses of not being a native speaker of Japanese myself, of not always knowing the nuance between the words. in the deepest facets or like the etymology behind them, because just when we were looking at the new trailer, I was like, wait, what's the difference between Unmei and Shukume? Because I've definitely heard of Unmei, but I'd never heard of Shukume. So looking into it, I found out that Unmei meant a fate that is changeable by one's effort, whereas Shukume is a fate that one is born with that's predestined and should theoretically be unchangeable, which is really curious in light of that trailer and Mikla's Shukume being abandoned, because from the way that the language is used, it sounds like a Shukume shouldn't be able to be abandoned. But anyway, so I might look at the native dictionary off screen right here and try to see if there's any additional stuff behind the meaning of Emi. It's kind of a weird thing to say while he continues on here. Hey, Little Church Lord, nice to see you again. And Ryan Dean. No, I wasn't stopped. I was just dumb. It happens.
Pool of meaning means some kind of force that the Golden Order provides that affects you. In other words, it's some kind of law of nature. And pool between meanings is described as Emi Ida, which can mean space between meanings or relationship between meanings. So this means pool between meanings refer to a force of the Golden Order to somehow affect the relationship between other things.
Alright, so at least with the goo.ne dictionary, there's nothing that seems like super important as far as like a hidden meaning for Emi. Which, yeah. Anyway, so maybe there's just like some other context that I don't know about.
Now to a more specific explanation, starting from an easier one.
Hey, Teen Sith.
Law of regression.
And Kyle.
I am mostly confident that I found the correct answer. Regression, kaiki, means a return to a previous or mean state. Reoccurrence and recursion are also meanings associated with kaiki, indicating a process or phenomenon that repeats or returns cyclically.
Yeah, I'm glad that he brought up this cyclical action of it, because this first character kind of implies it in a way that just saying like regression doesn't necessarily imply that it will repeat again, which is partially why I compared the law of regression potentially to Groundhog Day in my video about grace and whatnot. I feel that, Teen Sith. Don't tell me you also spent 3 hours on it, because then you're really sounding like me.
Recurrence and recursion are also meanings associated with kaiki, indicating a process or phenomenon that repeats or returns cyclically, or in a self-referential manner. But we are more interested in the mathematical meaning of this word. Regression is actually a math term. Look at this graph. We can see tons of dots, and it seemingly has no pattern. It looks like complete chaos with no order. But if we zoom out a little, the pattern starting to become pretty clear. The more the plot goes, the more is evident that the dots are heading to the line. They regressing to the line. So regression in math is a method in which, by understanding seemingly random data, we can create a line that represents the relationship between all things. Basically, creating order within chaos. Yeah, that's interesting and all, but how does this relate to the game? This is pretty simple. What is the goal of the Golden Order? From the Mating Rune of the Death Prince item description, the Golden Order was created by confining death and death. The signature feature of the Golden Order is the immortality of every being. In other words, the whole eternity in which nothing will change. The perfect order which never will be replaced. And I believe the best example of regression in the game is Omens. Omens in the game are representation of evolution and its random changes. How does evolution work? Every living organism has some mutation. They are not exact copies of their parents. These mutations are completely random, and sometimes they can be useful, helping you to survive. And these many horns covering Omen's bodies represents random changes from evolution. So evolution is basically chaos, a game of random, which Golden Order dislikes a lot.
So I have a number of like disagreements with this, but I want to be clear that my coming disagreements aren't necessarily due to like flaws in his argument, but just interpretations about the omens and their horns more specifically. But I want to let him finish his points, and then I might regress back a little bit further to talk more about the law of regression if he doesn't go back to this topic.
Look at this plot again. This regression line represents the perfect average human. And omens are these dots, which deviate from the mean. The more dots deviating from the line, the more it looks like chaos. That's why the Golden Order hates omen. They want a predictable, stable line. They don't want changes. They don't.
Well, I do think the way that he framed that argument was a little bit of a straw man, a way to make the arguments a little bit easier to attack. I don't necessarily disagree with the overall idea and the kind of idea of regression towards the mean representing a more like stable human. I've considered that as a possibility as well. I think I mentioned that in like my first Elden Ring video, the one about the Erdtree. But anyway.
Chaos. That's why the Golden Order hates omen. They want a predictable, stable line. They don't want changes. They don't want to evolve. Order must be eternal. The law of regression spell in the game further proves this point. Heals all negative statuses, dispels special effects, and reveals mimicry in all its forms. So it removes every deviation from the line. No buffs, no curses, dispelling all. You returning.
I think that's a smart way to frame the argument, even if I don't necessarily agree with it, that it removes all deviations from the line. But then first one would need to establish what the line is, which, you know, it's fine.
To your average state. That's what the low regression means. No changes allowed, no evolution, just an infinite stagnation. I have a lot more to say about this regression, evolution, omens, and Dunk Eater.
The rotten fools. My fate was the grandest, most brilliant of them all. Unleashing upon them a cursed blessing to war!
But it is too long, and does not fit in this video.
Rip.
I will create a new theory describing the metaphorical meaning of Dunk Eater ending. Please subscribe if you don't want to miss it. Now to the harder one, law of causality.
Alright, so since he's done with regression, I'm going to go back and talk about them. So, as far as the omens go, this is going to be a bit of a contentious topic because we don't actually know what their deal is with the omens. It seems like there's a very good possibility that they're pre-Erdtree, so they might not be a product of so-called de-evolution if they're like kind of there originally. They could have also been a post-Erdtree event, and like the blending of life and whatnot could have gone to create the omens, depending on whether or not you think like Godwin is the oldest child of Marika and Godfrey's union, and the Omen twins came later when life was being more blended together, perhaps, or you know, reverse it and say that the Omen twins came first and then Godwin came later. Where does that mean like Godwin be a product of regression towards the mean? I kind of feel like that wouldn't necessarily work for Lebovit's idea here with the Golden Order coming later, but I think it's just kind of problematic no matter how we look at the timeline. Anyway, so setting that stuff aside, I don't necessarily think the omens are actually a product of devolution to begin with, and part of my rationale for that is because they have like cursed blood. So while I certainly think that there's extra or excess life within the omens which curses their blood, like that's what the curses are, they're kind of like leftover life forces. Sorry, my dog's distracted me. The omen, hold on. Let me deal with her real quick. All right. So, what was I saying? Yeah. So the omens have cursed blood, and I think that's where they get their horns from. I don't necessarily think it's quite the same as the type of crucible-style devolution that one would find in the Misbegotten with their ashes, their vestigial limbs, and things like that. Although, with that being said, we do have some oddities in the way that Morgott has the extra tail. It's not a vestigial tail, but whatever. And Moog himself can like grow wings. So there might be some other stuff to this that I don't really know or understand, which, you know, is just kind of par for the course at this point. And so if one doesn't necessarily believe that the Omen are fully crucible touched, that like kind of pokes a big hole into Levo's argument, but isn't like the most important thing here. So another facet of the law of regression could be that if you regress towards the mean and then like find the line of where things started to converge, you could potentially use that as part of an argument to begin to understand causality, because if you look at the state of a board with all the dots when he was like originally pulling out on this chart, they were kind of like concentrated. But another way you could look at it would be if you were to move the graph like further forward or backward in time, then you would be able to chart the motion between the two through that kind of pseudo regression, and then be able to look at the causality between those two positions. And that might be where regression also can factor into the Golden Order. That's not entirely directly causality there. So that's just like an altering perspective on the idea. So hopefully that answers some of those questions. Mr. Yada always assumed that Omen twins were first. You have nothing to back this up. That's fine. You know, I think it's fine to have that assumption because we don't really have evidence for it. But I think it's important to point out we don't know who was first. And then Elden Enthusiast was wondering if it's a literal curse on the golden lineage. The royal revenants you think could be golden lineage and are tied to wraith callers who summon the spirits and the omens spit out. Yeah, I don't really know what's going on with the royal revenants. Because they're called royalty, but so are like demi-human queens and whatnot. So not all royalty are golden lineage or America affiliated potentially. So are they also like related to grafting? Their situation is so strange that it doesn't seem like it'd be grafting, but they also don't seem dissimilar. So I don't know. Hey, in Mortue, welcome on into the channel. Have I heard of the Centered Tarnished channel? Yes. I was actually talking about the Centered Tarnished channel the other day when somebody wanted to learn more about Jung's perspective in relation to Elden Ring. Mal asks, am I saying the Omen are like the giants in the Book of Enoch? Monsters because they have too much power in them? Maybe, yes. And just for anybody who isn't too familiar with Dark Souls, the reason why I came to my conclusion is because of certain item descriptions and spell descriptions in the Dark Souls franchise. So let me pull something up for you guys. And this might still be a bit too abstract on its own. So let me know if this doesn't make sense, because it's kind of hard to remember every item description which is relevant to this, but hold on. Okay. Yeah. So I'll need to set this up a bit more, but for the sake of simplicity here, let's just say that one common thread amongst curses in the Dark Souls games is that curses eat away at the life force of things, and then Power Within, it kind of ties into that idea, but this is related to chaos and fire, a chaos flame, which might have a connection to curses. But anyway, moving beyond that, quotes. Excessive power eats away the life force of its caster, and like all dangerous spells, Power Within was kept secret for eons. End quote. So this might not make a ton of sense on its own, but another bit of context which is really important in Dark Souls is that the Chaos Flame is much more specifically related to life, and all of these life connections end up having like curse connections, and there's power within, which is kind of like the biggest through line between that concept of fire and life and curses. And so with that being said, excessive power eats away at the life force of its caster. Generally speaking, if you look at a curse, it's kind of like a form of alien external life towards the cursed object, I guess. And you could look at the idea of wraiths in something like Elden Ring and Rykard's blasphemous skullheads as kind of being like the remnant of ghost life. Like they're just like screaming in torment. That's a big thing. And they try to eat away at the essence of their victims. So that's kind of where I'm basing my conclusion on. I think the omens are kind of like what Mao would describe as the Book of Enoch giants, in that they're monsters because they have too much power in them. So for whatever reason, that power does seem to be concentrated in their horns based off of like the seedbed curse and whatnot, which might be a little bit clearer in like the 1.0 description of the game. Artificial Pixel, welcome into the stream, and thanks so much for the $10 super chat. I appreciate that. You think it's odd that the twins have M names? Seems like Godfrey may have been playing stepdad. Also, there is no proof Godwin wasn't Crucible touched. Love the convo streams, by the way. Thank you so much. And yeah, you also bring up a good point that we also don't know if Godwin was touched by the Crucible. But nonetheless, I don't think it's too unfair to say that most people would associate the omens more with the Crucible than Godwin. But since I am of the opinion that Godwin would probably... Actually, I don't really have a strong opinion on Godwin. I don't know. I just need more evidence. But thank you, Artificial Pixel. And then Daniel Van Spaindonk. Welcome on into the stream. Anything Crucible touched deviate from this would mean that humans are much closer to God. So for what it's worth, the Crucible was seen as a signifier of the divine in ancient times. So I feel like, to borrow a quote from Abe Simpson, they used to be with it, but then what was it changed? And it'll happen to you. Elden wonders if the omens are counterparts to the Hollows in Dark Souls, a sign of something done wrong to the world. I don't know, because I think I can see where you're coming from with that. They're like kind of victims of circumstance rather than like the whole undead thing. Okay, I can kind of see what you're saying there. Dago said Quaylog had some interesting ideas about the omens being vessels in her latest video. You've been hoping I'd cover that one day? Thanks. So yeah, if I miss something, just feel free to leave a comment on the video or on the Discord in the channel feedback channel, and that way I can add it to my list. But yeah, it's been taking me way too long to get through these videos. Hey, Eamon, welcome back. And MGHL, nice to have you too. And Blackman. Or is it really Black Minnesota? BLK Minnesota? Eamon thinks the aquatic stuff could be like a crucible of death versus a crucible of life. So like water congeals to be like a death thing. That wouldn't be too surprising, especially with the way that water kind of pools out of Godwin's eye in that one trailer there. So, oh yeah, somebody said something about the Omen twins. As far as that's concerned, we do have direct confirmation that they are of the Golden Lineage, and that the Golden Lineage were the children of Godfrey. So I would disagree that the Omen children should be considered having different parents, unless we get something completely different to substantiate such claims. Alright, let's go back into the video for the law of causality.
Now to the harder one, law of causality. I can see two implications here. The first one is about the nature of actions. Omen helped us to understand regression, and those who live in death will help us to understand causality. This says,
Those who live in death fall outside the principles of the Golden Order. Their mere existence sullies the guidance of gold.
So for Levo, if you catch the VOD of this stream, make sure that your audio is balanced between the NPCs and your voice and, you know, the background music. Hey Galamoth, nice to see you again. Appreciate that. That's what I get for pausing the video.
Its truth, and so it is the vermin must be exterminated, down to the very last.
so those who live in death violate some of the principles of the Golden Order. So which law do they neglect? The idea came to me when I was researching what causality is and found this explanation. The law of causality is the law of identity applied to action. All actions are caused by entities. The nature of an action is caused and determined by the nature of the entities that act. A thing cannot act in the contradiction to its nature. And finally, it all came together. Of course, these who live in death are haunted. They contradict the nature of the Golden Order, the law of causality. We have a simple course of life. When you are killed, you die. Go be reborn from Erdtree or something. Simple cause and effect. But these who live in death literally don't care. After Godwin was killed, he didn't die. He lived. He lived in death. That's clearly a contradiction in cause and effect. You cannot just live after death. The second implication describes the pull between meanings. Golden Order can control the relationship between all things. It links all things in a chain of relation. The first evidence comes from a Japanese translation. Causality, Inga, can also be translated as fate, particularly within Buddhist philosophy, and symbolizes the intricate web of cause and effect that governs the universe and personal destiny.
So yeah, I think fate right there is a little bit too strong of a word for Inga, and karma would be the better translation as far as the Buddhist interpretation is concerned, but we don't really have a good distinction of the difference between them in, you know, like modern speech for like most people. So that's typically why fate gets used, because if you say karma, people don't necessarily understand that, but fate is kind of something that they do, even though they are very different. And I cover a lot of this on my video on the grace of gold, where karma is, for all intents and purposes, causality, but it doesn't necessarily link into destiny in such a way to define like predestination. So to give an example of that, I used the butterfly effect, where the conditions of the past will go on to affect the conditions of the present, and any actions which take place now in the present can go on to affect the state of the world in the future. And then, of course, as time goes on to pass, the present becomes the past, and the future becomes the present, and so like the cycle repeats itself in a way. Well, it doesn't exactly repeat, but the chain is causal and can be linked all the way back to potentially the beginning and the end. So that's kind of where that idea gets tied into fate there. So like to apply it to like Newtonian physics, for every action there is a reaction. That's kind of like causality there. So all right. Thought some other people just came in. Dev Chappelle, I like the name. You said Glowmide Queen can't be Marika, right? Since the Glowmide Queen dates back to the prehistoric age and Marika's a newer god. I will ask you what you think the sources are specifically for why the Glowmide Queen is stuck to the prehistoric age. But for what it's worth, I might be one of the first, if not the first, to legitimately try to suggest that the Glowmide Queen could be Marika. So, hate to break the news. Eamon asks, I'm assuming to Levo, is it? Life, quote, life sprouts from death as from birth, such as the way of the living, end quote. Goldmask certainly thinks Dee and the Hunters are wrong to think those who live in death are against the fundamentals. So, okay, yeah. I was going to let Levo try to cook a bit more, but I would be in agreement with you that I don't necessarily think those who live in death are against the idea of causality or regression, and I think Goldmask is right on the money for bemoaning what became of the Hunters and their dogmatic ramblings, because if something exists, it exists because the order allows it to exist, essentially. I think that's an inherent part of fundamentalism, I suppose. And Jay Whipple, welcome on in. You say the stars and the fate are most likely a contribution from Martin. It's too tied into too many real-world illusions for fate to just be Buddhist karma. Oh, I wasn't trying to say that it's like all Buddhist karma. I'm just talking about the idea of talking about karma within this context of cause and effect, and the law of causality in response to what Levo was saying. And Danny Sandu, welcome on in. Karma equals sin is probably the best Christian synonym. I would disagree with that because sin is inherently negative, but karma isn't negative. So you can have negative karma which affects you now and you need to deal with it. And in so dealing with negative karma, that can create good karma or good influences in the future. So, yeah. Oh no, you don't have to apologize. I just want to be clear in case I came off a certain way. So, yeah, I definitely don't mind questions if they're constructive and, honest, earnest. You say there is no positive karma? I mean, I've heard very differing things, and that could definitely change based on school of thought, but I've definitely heard of positive karma. Teen Sith says, is an English saying like what goes around comes around more analogous? Potentially, yes.
Lies is the intricate web of cause and effect that governs the universe and personal destiny. So law of causality means that the Golden Order can control the fate of every being, and choose everyone to be reincarnated by the Erdtree. But these who live in death are immune to this manipulation. So it's basically another Berserk reference. Elden Ring by far has the most Berserk reference in Souls games. So, in Berserk manga, there is a term called flow of causality. It represents the idea that everything is predestined.
この世界には人の運命を司る何らかの超越的な律、神の手が存在するのだろうか。少なくとも人は自らの意志さえ自由にはできない。
So there's a slight difference here that I wanted to point out in like the subs. Not that I think any of the sub was like really off by any means. Okay, so this should be pretty easy to get. For what it's worth, when they say law here, and this is not a mistranslation. I'm not trying to say anything like that. And if anything, it's just like a difference in the way that the term is used between Elden Ring and the Berserk subtitles here. So you can say that law and order, Elden Ring style order, is interchangeable here because that's the term that he uses. So anyway, is the destiny of mankind controlled by some I should probably read this out loud in case anybody was just listening along. So, okay.
It represents the idea that everything is predestined.
この世界には
In this world,
人の運
is the destiny of mankind controlled by some transcendental entity or law / order?
神の
Is it like the hand of God hovering above?
手が存在するのだろうか。少なく
At least it is
とも
true
人は自ら
that man has no control even over his own will.
の意志さえ自由にはできない。
Right. So yeah. Like Ritsu as law kind of makes more sense than order in some ways, but actually, how do they call law of regression? Oh, Genni. So like more like principle of regression. Okay. Anyway. Just had to go off on a little tangent there. Danny says, you want to get rid of any karma in order to reach nirvana. Yeah, I've definitely heard that as well, but I do legitimately believe that there's just different schools of thought about that, because one could look at karma as just kind of actions which don't necessarily produce like a lot of like negativity. And so people might just say good karma as a way of making the concept more approachable to people who aren't too familiar with it. So you might be right in saying that it's like a misconception, but nonetheless, I think it's a pretty good tool. I don't know, because I like to be pretty pedantic about it. So anyway, I'm just gonna move on there. No, but before I move on, I also want to say thanks, Danny. I appreciate it. And if you have like more direct info that you want to share with that stuff, feel free to do so. Let me just read what y'all are saying real quick. Little Church Lore thinks causality in the context of the Golden Order fundamentalism refers to the Christian notion of causality, popular in Augustinian theology. And then you probably got cut off. Yeah, I don't know enough about Augustinian theology, so I'm really curious about the so-called Christian notion of causality. Eamon says law of regression can also be connected to Berserk if you look at the cyclical nature of things. Global Sequence, nice to see you again. You said the West seems to think of karma as a transactional concept. Maybe? I would need to think about that. Okay, yeah. I think I know what you're saying. Like, you need to do something for like good things to happen. Yeah. Whereas, what's his name? Danny might be saying like, no, you just need to like deal with everything so that way you can reach a point where you're able to let go and receive enlightenment, or attain enlightenment. Might be a better word. Eamon is saying the law of regression in Burke is a kind of force that allows the Skull Knight and Guts to rebel. Okay, thank you. Hey Drew, nice to see you again. And Eldon asks, do I think there's any karma stuff going on with Muriel's dialogue on the consequences of breaking a vow? So the thing is, like, I don't know what those consequences ever more dire really are. So The thing is, like, causality isn't necessarily like the supernatural force in like Buddhism exactly, or at least for real life. And so like basing it off of a more secular view of Buddhism, you shouldn't necessarily get like a kind of divine retribution or divine punishment for doing something bad. That's not exactly how the world works, because the world is without self. And so it's really like your own actions contribute to a state of the world, and whether like the state of the world is better from your actions or worse is just like a fact of life, essentially. And so do you essentially want to continue to create a worse world, or do you want to try to build a better world with the limited amount of time you have on it, I guess, is kind of the question. And there's a lot of nuance to that, because even if you do perform like what one would consider a lot of good deeds, there's always the possibility that such good deeds can go on to enable others to do evil deeds, I suppose. But that's just kind of getting a bit too like abstract and whatnot, maybe for the scope of this conversation. Hey, Bombay Beast, welcome on in. Bob, you said this sounds like dogmatic Christianism with the Buddhist stuff. I mean, it seems like we got those two big factions in the chat right now, so maybe. And then, of course, like we don't necessarily know how much is Gurm and how much is Miyazaki. And hey, Moxie, nice to have you in chat. It's a pleasure. Right. The fundamental principles of Augustinian theology are emanation and return. Okay, I might need to look into that sometime. Thank you, Little Church Lore. Yeah, I would definitely appreciate that.
And the fate of all people is controlled by a higher force, often referred to as the idea of evil. This law dictates fate, making events and outcomes inevitable as a part of the world's design. However, like in the Elden Ring, control isn't total. Certain beings, like the School Knight or gods, seems to operate outside of predetermined fate. So maybe Skeletons, which lives outside of the law of causality, is also a Berserk reference, referring School Knight.
You know how the other day I forgot the dude that's imprisoned at the beginning of Berserk, and he's like one of the most badass dudes alive? Isn't his name Zod? Why does it come to my mind now?
There are far more evidence that the Golden Order indeed can manipulate fate. The most obvious one is the telescope item description. During the age of the Erdtree, carrion astrology withered on the vine. The fate, once read in the night skies, had been fettered by the Golden Order. The second piece of evidence is in the first ever cinematic trailer. The narrator refers to the Elden Ring as
that which commanded the stars, giving life.
The guy in the prison is wild?
The Elden Ring.
and stars are closely connected to fate. Also some fun observation. When the narrator says that which commanded the stars, we can see many string-like shapes, which are connected to Marika's hammer. I wonder, what are those?
It's a little bit unfortunate that this came out before the second trailer. I was wondering if he was going to go into it. Okay, so this came out before the new trailer.
I believe it must have some connection to commanding the stars, because the footage is definitely linked with the narrator's words.
And for what it's worth, I do think it is pretty damn explicit, or maybe not explicit, but heavily implied that grace is tied to fate, and this stuff might just be individual fates contained within the Elden Ring and whatnot, which may or may not tie into that last trailer we got.
Commanded the stars.
It's not a random clip, and it's not the first tease from the narrator, like the "don't tell me you don't see it" scene. During this verse, we first time seeing a woman instead of a man.
Don't tell me you don't see it.
It's like the narrator teasing us. This is the main lore twist of the game. Don't tell me you don't see it. So maybe these strings are not strings, but chains. Chains of relation, which control the relationship between meanings, and as we discussed earlier, control the stars. The third evidence, chain of relation, is related to fate manipulation, because in our culture, chains are symbolically tied to fate. Like Inga no Kusari from Bleach, which translates as chain of fate. But fate is written in the same kanji as causality in Elden Ring. Or more notably, look at Susan Sue Mayer's God and Cosmo in Stoicism, Part 1, Chapter 3, Abstract, Chain of Causes. What is Stoic fate? Let me read a piece from it. As the chain of causes presents throughout the cosmos, fate is the instrument by which the Stoic god exerts his providential activity. In fact, the Stoic god is often identified with the fate understood as the chain of causes. Causation is not a relation between events, but between bodies. This conception of causes is reflected in what the Stoics means by the chain of causes in terms of which they define fate. It is a complex system of reciprocal influence between all the bodies that exist in the cosmos. It is literally one-to-one item description of the law of causality. God controls fate by a chain of causes, which is the chain of relation. And it even describes the pull between meanings as the relation between bodies. It seems a direct reference to me. And there are a lot of
Yeah, which is kind of why I was always a little bit confused why there was the law of regression, because I felt like it was kind of more or less contained within the description of causality alone. So I do have more thoughts about that, especially in relation to the whole like cyclical stuff and regression also relating to immutability, which Levo hasn't touched on at least yet. But anyway, yeah.
of other examples in media, where chain and fate are symbolically tied. If you still do not believe me, I have a fourth reason. Remember the pull between meanings translation from Japanese. Pull can be translated as some force and, specifically, gravitational pull, so it controls meanings by gravitation. And to what also do gravitation?
I don't necessarily know you can have it going both ways. It's not like the gravity of regression. It's just, the pull of regression and the pulling force, essentially.
Gravitational powers tie in Elden Ring. Stars. Like Astel or Falling Star Beast. They are literally a fallen stars. And they all use gravitational magic as their power. And what does Rodan do to stop stars? To stop fate? He used his gravitational magic. So it's a direct proof that gravitation can control stars, and more specifically fate. That's why gravitational pulls between bodies can mean controlling the fate of people.
So some criticisms that I would have about that is that we don't exactly see any Golden Order incantations or symbolism being directly related to gravity, which isn't necessarily that problematic in the grand scheme of things, because the next point that I would make is that we know Radagon went to Raya Lucaria to study sorcery from Renala, who is like a witch of the moon, and the moon can guide stars, and we don't see a very much lunar symbolism within the Golden Order at all as well. So while I don't necessarily disagree with the notion that the power of regression might be used to help chain in causality and fate and the night sky, I just wouldn't say that it's like direct, like literally gravity here. That's kind of the point that I want to get across. All right, read in chat real quick. Lonnie Donnie, also referred to as Gani DeLonghi. Welcome on in.
And this is the end of the theory. To summarize in simple words, the law of regression is a tendency to infinite stagnation and refusal to change. The law of causality defines the law of nature.
All right, so Mao agrees. So let me go ahead and pull it up then. All right. I'm blind. Okay, here we go. So it's not like the gravity of regression that's being referred to here. It says like the so-called gravity of meaning. So there's not like regression gravity. So I feel like he's double dipping on the semantic meaning of what Inyoku refers to here. Yeah. So that's kind of like where my big disagreement comes from. So, well, like the Golden Order might eventually like have some interaction with gravity indirectly. I don't think that's what the description's getting at. Eamon thinks that the push and the pull of the Alabaster and Onyx Lords before gold, perhaps, is related to regression and causality. It very well could be. All right.
Nature by controlling fate. All three variations of the Golden Order ending add a unique perspective to understanding the Golden Order. Golden Mask's endings tell us that there is a flaw in Golden Order. It's not the perfect order, and its creator are not the perfect being. The Dunk Eater's ending tell us about the law of regression by his connection to the evolutions and omens. And the Fierce ending is about this who neglect one principle of the Golden Order, law of causality. Of course, all of these endings are much deeper than that, but that's not the topic of this video. I tried to make all things simple. And one more thing before we end. I currently have 4 more theories in development. Reason why enemies are attacking us in Elden Ring.
That sounds fun.
Why Dunk Eater ending is the best for Elden Ring world, and why evolution is bad. What exactly is Golden Order? Explaining what it really does and how it looks. How grace works, and what is metaphorical meaning behind it. And one gameplay video, in which I give my recommendation for 3 best way to help prepare your character for the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC. Please subscribe, if you are interested in these topics, and leave comments. What do you think about my principle?
So I'm a little bit confused because he has like what looks to be like YouTube thumbnails, but when I looked at his video, there were only his channel, there were only 3 videos. So did they exist at one point and you deleted them, or are they actually legitimately upcoming ones? Because it seemed like the latter, but maybe he was just trying to future-proof how it looks. I don't know.
Of the Golden Order theory. And what you want to see next more? I will be extremely grateful to you. Thanks for watching.
Which one would I want to see more? Maybe the one about the enemies attacking, I guess, because I don't think I've really seen anybody cover that yet. So, hey, Donald Ray, welcome on in. Do I think there's going to be a connection explained between Mohg and Mesmer? You feel like a lot of people aren't talking about that? So that really depends on whether or not Mesmer is deriving its power from the Mother of Truth and whatnot. So I think there are a lot of thematic similarities between their flames, but with Mesmer having more black stuff, it almost seems to me like he should be a different thing. So I don't know. Good question, though. Do I believe that the Greater Will is the one great... Sorry. The Greater Will is the one great is a pantheonic god? I would disagree with that, but I also think it's a possibility that the one great was always just the Greater Will, essentially. But I wouldn't necessarily think of it as a pantheon. Alright, so yeah, no, that was a really good video. I'm going to go ahead and link it for you guys in the chat if you want to give Levo a like and a sub. Seems like they've got more content they want to produce here, so definitely looking forward to that. Black Man says, Mesmer doesn't seem to have any cursed blood, which attracts the Formless Mother. It's not necessarily cursed blood. I think the Formless Mother might just be attracted to wounds, because even though there's a lot of Mohg connections between Mohg, Okina, there's Mohg connections between Mohg. I don't know. There's a lot of Mohg connections with, or Bloody Mother connections between Mohg, Okina, and Eleonora. I have wondered whether or not the kind of madness found in the Lands of Reeds is just because of like blood loss, because like the bleeding katana Eastern sword type weapons, and if that's how Okina was led to Mohg and whatnot. But anyway, I don't know. Not pantheon? You mean pantheonic? Then I'm not sure of the difference, actually. Hey, Meow Laser, welcome back. Greater Will is just Marika having the strongest will? You might be right about that. And maybe that will is contained in a ring. Chadwick doesn't believe the one great's the Greater Will. Starling thinks the greater will is the one great, and the other outer gods all in one. In the lands between, individuals simply worship separate facets and not the whole. Maybe. I kind of feel like the greater will might not really be a god or really have an agenda other than just being an undifferentiated mass of wills. Mao? No. Alright, so yeah, I've gone ahead and shared Levo's video in chat. Next, we do have a story trailer lore breakdown of the newest story trailer by Smotown that we will jump into after I give you all a sneak peek preview of my Elden Ring contest trailer for their trailer contest, which I haven't even had time to upload because I finished it literally right before the stream here. So actually, let me find it. All right. Oh no, where did I put it? How did I label it? Oh, okay, here we go. All right. So, just a little bit of a setup. If anybody is unfamiliar with what's going on with the Elden Ring trailer contest thing, it's a contest for the fans to create essentially free trailers for Elden Ring's marketing team to hype up the release of Shadow of the Erdtree. So the terms of entry are essentially just use whatever is in the game without mods and or like the one trailer that they provided that was not the story trailer. So that's a kind of really big limitation, which took me a lot more time than I anticipated to go back and get all of this footage, making sure it was done without mods and everything. So yeah, spent way more time on this than I ever expected I would. And the videos all need to be under 5 minutes. Mine clocks in at 4:54. And there's like a bunch of categories in which they can be judged. So I'll say a little bit more about that at the end of the video because it might like influence things. So hopefully you guys can enjoy this and give me some feedback if you have any. Not that I'm not entirely sure how actionable it will be. So, all right. This is the first time Method is hearing about the contest. What's this all about? I mean, I just explained it. Obviously, you type that in before my explanation there. All right, V-Limit. I'm a little bit intimidated with him in chat, especially since I've gotten a little bit of a hint as to what he's working on. So, yeah, all right, here we go.
Can you see it then? The guidance of grace, I mean. I can't see it at all no more. Makes no bloody sense anyway. Why some no-name shithead like me should get called to the lands between. Cruel bloody joke, you ask me. Maybe it's been broke for a good long time.
Warrior!
So, Tarnished. Have you ever harbored doubts about the burden of grace and the dogmatic ramblings of the Fingers? The Erdtree blessed the Tarnished with grace, but it was all too meager in the face of the enormity of their task. The Tarnished were forced to scavenge, squabbling for crumbs, like the Shard-bearers vying for power in the wake of the Shattering. If the Erdtree, and indeed the very gods, would debase us so, why accept the burden of their grace?
A crown is warranted with strength.
That is the guidance of grace. It will lead you, Tarnished, to the path you are meant to follow, even if it leads you to your grave. My doubts had been piling up, you see. The words of the Two Fingers cannot be trusted. But when the Elden Ring was shattered, the Two Fingers were corrupted, their guidance skewed. The Tarnished were spurned by grace, forsaken by the Two Fingers. And now they ask you to mend their crumbling world? Your loyalties are misplaced with them. Enjoy your miserable death. Bless the Mogwin dynasty with love.
Pure and radiant, he wields love to shrive clean the hearts of men. There is nothing more terrifying.
I dreamt for so long as I awaited his return.
I've got the stuff of champions. And champions, ironic as it is, are oft forced to walk a tainted path.
Cripes, you make this nonsense seem, well, less nonsensical. Perhaps a Tarnished will be Elden Lord after all.
What a pathetic excuse for a lord you were. Craven to the bone.
I always hated the gibberish about lost grace and the laughable two fingers. I thought I could lend a hand in unmasking the charade.
You have your own calling. To be the next Elden Lord. When you become Elden Lord, please illuminate me. Lay bare the secrets of life which cause the Elden Ring.
Wag your tail for master all you like, but your loyalty is merely blind. Goodness gracious, the way it glistens. Utterly enchanting. To think this was once a demigod's very fate.
Brave, tarnished. Thy strength befits a crown. Our seed will look back upon us and recall an age of...
Mother, wouldst thou truly lordship sanction in one so bereft of life?
I did not imagine it ending like this, but I will not forget what you have done.
All right. So yeah, that's the video. So I don't know how you guys feel about that ending there. I honestly don't want it there, but if I make it through like the first round, there is like a humor category for the like final round. So I felt like I had to do something that was somewhat humorous so I didn't get a freaking 0, but I don't know if I want to keep it there regardless, but yeah, I might just do like 2 trailers, like a one like hype trailer that's not the contest submission, and then like the actual contest one. But maybe it's good to have that kind of goofy ass ending, even though it's based off of something you can't do anymore since they patched it out. But anyway, that did actually happen to me for my first playthrough of the game. I did accidentally kill Millicent after getting her to that stage. So anyway, yeah, thank you. So Mao asked if it was too long for a trailer. Well, it is in the limits of the contest guidelines of having it be within 5 minutes. Mine's at 4:54. Not that I was actually trying to get to 5, but I was just trying to fit in a full narrative there. Yeah, Horaloo just yelling warrior made you laugh. Yeah, I don't know why, but that's just like, it just seemed right to me. Like that's something like my brain worked. So you got like Blackguard making this like philosophical speech about like how he's a shithead, doesn't deserve grace, and then Horaloo's like, forget all that, warrior. I would scream, but not into the mic for you guys. So it's just like, screw all that. You're here for a reason. Let's get down to business. Appreciate that. Happy up. All right. So a couple interesting comments throughout the video. Where was it? Yeah, Eamon said, the fire giant lifting his leg in the same pose as America lifting the stolen golden strands could both be communicating with a god. That's a very interesting observation. Yeah, I would not have thought of the fire giant lifting his leg towards potentially the outer god, the outer fell god, could be comparable to Marika lifting her rune arc like thing, but you might be right there. Actually, yeah, maybe I don't need that final jab there with the Age of Mother. Yeah, so I was really struggling to think of a way to like keep the Shadow of the Erdtree stuff relevant. And so like my general idea behind this video was to just kind of catalog the kind of journey that I took on the Lands Between. So I don't remember if I originally stopped before I did the Cardinal Sin with the Fire Giant, but if this wasn't necessarily emblematic of my first playthrough, it was definitely the case of my second one. So I didn't include stuff about Castle Morn, essentially. That's like the only really big difference in the stuff underground and Ronnie. I mean, I did a little bit. I tried to just like show my chronology going through the game. So, you know, you go through the precipice of anticipation, you die, then you get your ass handed to you by this guy, which I, you know, wanted to do off a screen, hide that. I did a little bit of that invasion stuff with the Volcano Manor. I should probably change this footage so it's not Raging Wolf, but I was just over getting more footage, man. And then we fought Margit, then Godric. Then I went to, well, I actually went to Caelid my first playthrough, but, you know, typically most people go to Liurnia, get the Academy key, and I thought this was like a really cool pose. I felt like I tend to underrepresent spellcasters, so I tried to do something a little bit more dramatic with that. Then a spellcaster going into Realicaria to meet Renala. Flash cut to our trip back into Caelid. So I feel like the Fire Monk is out of place. I originally had another line by Melina saying, "Oh, Erdtree, you shall burn," because I had like this other edgy stuff of like distrusting everybody. Felt like I needed to add something like this to make it seem more like a real trailer. Oh yeah, and then a cool little bit of a game knowledge for you guys here. All the fire effects that I have on in the background right now are just taken from the time when you burn the Erdtree with Destined Death. So there's like 3 seconds where you get like these embers before the soldiers pop up. So I just reduced the opacity. I layered two of them on top of each other, and then used that to make this kind of a nifty, professional looking background based entirely off of the in-game footage there. So it's a little bit of extra lore on that. You get Radon. And so, yeah, because I had "Oh, Erdtree, you shall burn," that's kind of why I had this burning in the background for this shot, but I think it just looks cool too. Then I think it's, if you're playing a fantasy game, you want to see more dragons to get you hyped up, and it's like, enjoy your miserable death. Get stomped, kid. FromSoft. And yeah, there's just a cool little montage. We get Rykard to the Volcano Manor. Then we face Morgott. And then just some more exposition stuff. Then after you face Morgott, you go up the Lift of Rold to get to the Forbidden Lands. You fight the Fire Giant. You might go back and do anything you missed after the Fire Giant before you burn the tree. So you talk to Ronnie. You do the Estelle stuff. You get stomped. And then Mikola and Melania, obviously, in Moog. So that's just kind of like where I was going with that. And okay, now that you've got all of that side content out of the way, now you go back, burn the Erdtree, fight the damn Godskin duo. I felt like I had to include them for, like, you know, big journey parts. And it's just really funny that the Albinorix managed to somersault like that. And then, of course, Malekith, Godfrey, Three Fingers, if you want to do it at that point, is probably like a really good one because you get immediate access to the sewers. And then Placidusax is just like, oh, maybe you missed this before you finish the game. And then Radagon. So, base game's over. How do I bring it back?
An age of
Mother.
The jump cut, that's how you bring it back. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed that. It was a blast to make. The black screen of "Do you see it?" is a great way to start off. Thank you, Methoda. So yeah, how did you guys feel about the final gag with this? Now that I think about it, I might just cut it, because if I have Age of Mother, that might just be funny enough where I don't get like absolutely 0 points. But thank you guys. Hey Sean Ranlet, welcome into the stream. I'm just showing off a trailer that I'm making for the Elden Ring contest. So yeah, after that we'll be checking out Smotown's classic of the Erdtree story trailer analysis. All right, Methoda said the final gag did not land. Okay, no, that's perfect. Yeah, I might just cut it out then. Yeah, I was also a little bit worried about how well the audio came with the Mesmer stuff, because I had to like try to isolate it, but it just was not super great because there's a lot of stuff going on in this cutscene. But I do think the Pure and Radiant line came out really well for having to isolate that audio as well. Should throw in Gideon saying "Dolly Botherer" there. Okay. Yeah, I think I will cut out that final gag, because that's not something I even wanted. I was like, oh man, I need to have something for the humor, but I don't know why I didn't think of an Age of Mother as potentially being humorous, but yeah, so Scalisi wants me to try to make Mesmer's spear stabbing into the ground. Now, that's honestly the hardest part, because there's such little Mesmer footage available that I couldn't really make it work. Because the rules of the contest are that we could use game footage and the materials provided on the contest page, which is only the first trailer. I can't use any footage of Mesmer from the second one. Otherwise, I think I could have made it work a bit better, but the pains we have to go through. I should have Alexander say "smack me on the rear." I thought about including a shot of Alexander with some other NPCs and padding the footage out a bit more, but I kind of don't have a lot of time to make that work. All right, so thanks for sticking through that one with me, guys. So let's go ahead and transition into the next video with story trailer, lore breakdown, Shadow of the Erdtree by good friend of the channel, Smotown. And thanks for all of the feedback, too. All right, here we go.
Shadow of the Erdtree dropped a new cinematic trailer that was oozing with confidence, beauty, and horror. It set the tone for the upcoming DLC, which will clearly be a story of the Erdtree's origins, and the brutal price that was paid for its gestation. While we are still far away from truly understanding what happened here, the story trailer clearly gave us plenty to talk about, and plenty more questions that need answered. What did Marika do? Who did she betray? Who were the people slaughtered by Mesmer, and why were they? And of course, why is Micha here now? So in this lore analysis video, we are going to build upon what we learned in the first gameplay reveal trailer, by dissecting this new Elden Ring story trailer. And remember that if you like Elden Ring lore, then consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. So for me, the most intriguing question posed by the DLC is the subject first broached by this story trailer: the beginning. The narrator of the trailer tells us that Micha told them about the beginning of gold and the Erdtree, presumably. This is my presumption because we know from the Bandai Namco website, and quotes from Miyazaki directly, that the Shadowlands of the DLC are the location in which the Golden Tree was first formed. It is becoming increasingly clear that Marika did something pretty dark in order to create the Erdtree, and thus the foundations of her Golden Empire. Again, according to the flavor text on the Bandai Namco website, this is also the area which Marika first arrived in the lands between. It all happened here. The fact that the Erdtree's foundations are steeped in blood is not just shown by the words of the trailer, but the tone and imagery of these opening moments. It is bloody and transgressive. It makes us feel unease and disgust. Marika's hands are literally coated in blood. As an aside,
so does most people in chat believe that this right here is the Erdtree, or do you think this technically would predate the Erdtree? So I think this is pretty much like the most commonly assumed thing, which is perfectly fine. I just have a little bit of reservations because we don't exactly know what this is, and this might not really be a tree at all, but with all of the way that the people in the roots of the catacombs look, it definitely wouldn't come as the biggest of surprises for this to be a tree, despite there being like no wooden looking like structure to it right this moment. Little Church isn't sure. Black Man thinks it's the Crucible, as well as Starling. True Connoisseur says pre-Erdtree thing. Meow says the creating the lands between. She's between some crap. Oh man. Greg says Crucible. Primordial matter is bodies. Okay.
It is almost certainly Marika
Not sure
that
yet.
is shown in this scene, if you had any doubts. As highlighted in this image by Twitter user Zolewski2nd, the bangle on her wrist and the golden tie on her arm that we see in this trailer at different points match the jewellery of Marika that is shown.
Actually, that's kind of... I didn't ever really think to look at... I guess she's got sleeves covering her. Oh, this can't be Marika because her chest isn't out. Unironically.
You see in this trailer at different points match the jewellery of Marika that is shown in the base game's intro cinematic. The trailer tells us that there was a seduction and a betrayal, and we see Marika taking some golden strands from a corpse, or some other kind of bloody remains, and she holds them high triumphantly. So this is likely the moment when Marika would become the next bearer of the Elden Ring, and leader of the Erdtree people. So to me it suggests that whoever Marika betrayed and stole this golden power from must have been the previous Elden Lord, or God, that she seduced and killed for their power. As I've discussed in numerous lore videos, we know that there were Elden Lords and gods long before Marika was the god of the Erdtree era.
Oh no, my soul leaving my body. So, if anybody's unfamiliar with my channel, I am one of the most preeminent haters of the Placidus Sax was an Elden Lord theory, because it is contingent on item description being hearsay, in that it is said that Placidus Sax was Elden Lord. Well, who the hell is saying it? We don't know. So I take it to be a rumor, because we have other item descriptions which state that Godfrey was the first Elden Lord, and I have more recently been rethinking that with the idea that titles, if that is supposed to be a title, might not necessarily have factual bearing on the world, because, you know, Gideon's title is the all-knowing, and my guy certainly isn't exactly all-knowing there.
Placidus Sax's remembrance tells us as much. He was the Elden Lord and consort to a god.
And then here we go, we have is said. So that's kind of like the big red flag for me here.
Before the Erdtree was even a thing. I've also long pondered the idea that there may have been many Elden Lords in the interim period between Placidus Sax and Marika. For example, Elden John may well have been the Elden Lord or god of the ancient era.
And as Placidus Sax, damn it, why did I say that? As Scalazy says in chat, and I kind of agree with this take, would be that Placidus Sax is the equivalent to an Elden Lord of a previous age, and Elden Lord is a title that's specific to Marika's order. So that's typically how I view the situation between the two. So I think there is no doubt that Placidus Sax was the biggest, baddest guy around before the Erdtree, but I don't necessarily think that he was an Elden Lord, and he may have still had control of the Elden Ring, but he might not have brandished it quite the same way that Elden Lords do under Marika. So that might be one way to try to cope with the situation there.
I would therefore suggest that there's a good chance that the body that the golden strands are being plucked from here, and the person that was seduced and betrayed by Marika, is likely the god or Elden Lord of the prior order, and they were killed by Marika so she could steal their power and use it in a ritual to create the Erdtree. And we have never heard of them because Marika likely erased this period of treachery for good reason.
So I guess her pose is technically different from the Fire Giant's pose, because Fire Giant was palms inward, Marika's was palms outward, but that might not be too relevant.
Every monarch throughout history in the real world also wants a more positive picture painted of their reign, especially if they took power through bloody means, and Marika would be no different. As for the bloody construct of blood, and the throne that Marika ascends at the beginning, we can of course only guess, but I do have some ideas. Zyostorm suggested that this may be linked to the godskins, given there are a lot of fleshy bodies here that appear to not have skin, and there's certainly a thematic logic to this. The body that she pulls the gold from as well is also covered in a fabric that is not a million miles away from the appearance of a godskin robe. However, my main issue with this is that the godskins are repeatedly said to have hunted the gods, and Marika and her kin will have not been considered a god at the time of this event. However, this isn't to say that the relationship between Marika and the godskins didn't change at some point, and at an earlier stage she worked with them to destroy the prior pantheon. However, I think the truth is a little darker. I think this blood construct is a vile sacrificial offering, that when combined with the strands of gold was able to gestate the Erdtree. The golden strands seem to be fused or tied onto this sacrifice as Marika pulls on them, to me making it feel like this mountain of corpses is a constituent part of what would become the Erdtree. A crime...
Yeah, and I kind of agree with that assessment Smotown was saying there. And so, Aemon takes it is said as, this is hearsay when we find it early or in a not hidden place, but when it is said is in a secret description in a hidden old place, you take it as only murmurs survive. So yeah, if we had nothing else to contradict the Placidusac stuff, I would probably take it at face value, because I don't really find a lot of value in debating whether or not every item description is unreliable, even if it is hearsay. Even though I do think we should doubt them to a degree, I would just say that because of all of the other item descriptions which state that Godfrey is the first Elden Lord, I am more inclined to believe that as opposed to the one thing which is explicitly written as hearsay. Hey Rex West, welcome back to the stream. Not a fan of theories that suggest the game lies to us? It's not a lie if that's a belief that's held in the lands between.
I'm so heinous and wrong that it created shadow alongside gold. If this is true, Marika slaughtered hundreds, nay thousands, of people to achieve her goals, sacrificed them upon the altar of her ambition in the most literal way possible. The composition of the scene also isn't accidental to me. It almost looks like a birthing canal. It makes us think about the bloody and visceral elements of childbirth, and it sort of taints our image of the Erdtree's perfect gestation. Before, I saw the Erdtree as a sort of immaculate celestial object, but here is this really raw...
Rex said, if we went that route, then everything could be unreliable. I strongly, intensely disagree with you, because I am clearly stating everything that is hearsay should be double guessed or like falsified, whereas if nothing is indicated to either be hearsay or speculation, then it should be treated as fact as far as item descriptions are concerned. But I will always treat any line of NPC dialogue as a secondhand source of information, because there's a huge theme in FromSoft games of NPCs not having the full knowledge of events which has transpired, or being having like certain agendas because of their affiliations to certain factions in such worlds. Yeah, and as Ella Delia says, welcome back to chat, by the way, if she says, some people believe that the Earth is flat, she's not lying to us. There are people who believe that, and she's conveying that accurately. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned, Elden Lord is a specific thing, and Godfrey is the first of them, but that doesn't mean that there couldn't have been other types of lords, like an Olden Lord, which Placidus Axe may fit under. So Galamoth says, if Marika became a god at some point, she literally can't be an eternal god. So as far as that's concerned, she can be considered eternal after a certain point. So it's not like eternal necessarily means like only, as in like prehistoric, she was like always the god. Like as soon as she became the god of her age, she was an eternal god to that age. So of course, by the time we like go through the game and defeat her and whatnot, you might be able to argue that she's no longer eternal, and that's kind of hinted at with the Sacred Relic Blade. But I don't think there's any item descriptions which actually calls Marika eternal, and it's all either voiceover work or NPCs. All right. Hey, Natural Phenomenon, welcome on in. Where does the game start and reality end? At your fingertips. Moxie says, it's only the opening cinematic which calls her the Eternal. You're wondering the same thing. I think Ronnie might call her that in the story trailer as well. All right. And yeah, as far as like the eternal stuff goes, we are told about the eternal cities, and whether or not you want to believe that the eternal cities and the Nox are literally eternal, or if it's just a way to describe that race, you might be able to say, well, maybe Marika was like a denizen of the eternal cities and is therefore a resident of the eternal cities, because Gowry says something kind of strange, like, what does Gowry say exactly? Descendants of the Eternal in English. It's just really weird, but there are kind of other ways to cope with the Marika the Eternal situation. Yeah. As Mao says, the Sacred Relic Blade says that it was made from a god that should have lived a life eternal. However, it does not say that it did, and it does not actually describe the god as eternal. So the game is very consistent on this front. There is no gotcha that you guys have so far. And yeah, as Ding Dong says, it's implied that she is one of the people who are seldom born but long-lived, the Newman, and that could also explain why she may have had the epithet of the Eternal. Doggo says, Ronnie calls Millennia the Severed, which you find odd now. At the time, we thought it was describing her arm, but now you're less confident about that. The Severed also does appear in one of the talismans. It might be the Winged Sword or... Yep, Winged Sword insignia. And it looks like it might show up elsewhere, but it might be NPC stuff. Yeah, NPC stuff. So we do have Millennia the Severed here in the Winged Sword insignia. So, yeah. Severed is probably a pretty good way to describe this. I don't even know how it... Yeah. Yeah, Severed's perfectly fine. It's kind of hard to like make a literal translation out of Kakemi. So it's like broke body, but not really. It's flowery stuff. All right. Galamoth says, it sounds like we agree that Marika being the one true god is propaganda. It's definitely propaganda, which is why like Corrin believes it and Goldmask doesn't. And Scaleezy says, people are arguing if the Eternal is a statement of fact when it's her title. To be fair, not everybody remembers every single item description super accurately, and so they might think of Marika the Eternal and think it's part of an item description and is therefore like more factual. But I mean, I like to give everybody the benefit of the doubt when I can, because I would attribute to ignorance that which I can instead of malice. So I think it's better to just double check things live so that we're all on the same page. Hey, iMan, welcome back in. Alright, let's go back to the video.
And brutal birthing scene to remind us that the foundations of the Erdtree Empire is literally built upon bodies, and it isn't as clean and golden as the ruling body would have you believe. When discussing this blood sacrifice with my editor David, he pondered if this fleshy construct had anything to do with Erdtree burial, and if Erdtree burial played a role in keeping the Erdtree alive. This is an excellent point, and makes me think of Erdtree burial in general and its purpose. A practice where we see bodies being piled into the roots of the Erdtree and being absorbed. What if the practice of Erdtree burial is a continuation of that original blood sacrifice of Marika? One can't help but see the similarities between the fused bodies of Erdtree burial and those in this opening scene of the story trailer.
And with that idea in mind, depending on how one feels about like the whole Great Tree as an entity, we're told that catacombs were built at Great Tree roots, and it is possible that these catacombs predate the age of the Erdtree by a significant margin, because there's a lot of weird stuff about the catacombs that's kind of hard to reconcile if they were all built post Erdtree. But even pre-Erdtree, there's still like weird stuff, because you see a bunch of urns. They have spirit ashes, which implies that fire was used within them, but spirit ashes all seem to be post-shattering phenomena. Like, we don't know if any of the spirit ashes that we get died before Marika broke the ring, essentially. So you might be able to argue like Black Knife Teach and her ashes could have existed before the ring was fully shattered as a byproduct of the Night of the Black Knives. But anyway, there's no direct confirmation of that. So that isn't necessarily problematic of whether or not they used fire before the Erdtree in the catacombs with like all the cremated urns and whatnot, or after. The only question would be that if there was Erdtree burial before there was an Erdtree, does that mean such bodies would have gone on to feed the Great Tree, which I don't believe many people would find too problematic if they're already a Great Tree truther. So there are no bodies in the recesses of the catacombs. Not now, but yeah, it's questionable if bodies in the catacombs got moved. So like I said, I just think the catacombs are problematic because certain catacombs do have like Erdtree worship imagery, which is kind of weird. And then other catacombs have Erdtree burial watchdogs, which have glintstone, which would imply that it would probably be like a post-Karian union, because were the forces of the Erdtree using glintstone before Radagon's union with Renala? Maybe, but it just seems kind of out of character for them. But with that being said, the Erdtree burial watchdogs also seem really ancient, but they're also called Erdtree burial watchdogs, so they seem to be watching Erdtree burials, more specifically. But then, like, that could just be what they're doing now. That might not describe what they always were. It's rough out here. Natural Phenomenon asks, do we have any reason to believe there were no spirit ashes before the shattering? Maybe you're misunderstanding. We don't really have a reason to believe it, other than spirit existing as immortal essence under the Golden Order. And so it does raise the question whether or not spirits only became immortal and like messed up after the shattering, or if it was just like an unseen or a hidden facet to the Golden Order that was always there just under the surface that everybody was unaware of until Deathroot appeared and exposed the flaw in the Order, as Roger kind of hints at. And then Global Sequence says, TA assumes that the urns are from the Deathbird Deathflame time. Mao asks, didn't Marika break the ring on the Night of the Black Knives? Potentially. We don't actually know when she broke it. I tend to think it probably would have happened pretty soon after the Night of the Black Knives. We also don't know, like, how long Godwin had died before the news had reached Marika's ears. There's a lot of unknowns to that situation, which could complicate things because, yeah, so I'll just leave that there for now. Eamon asks, the watchdogs are built by the Golem Maker, right? Learning when he is from will say a lot. I don't remember if it's the Golem Maker specifically, but you might be right. It's been a long time since I looked at like Watchdog and Imp lore. What's the consensus on Rosus being anti-Deathbird propaganda? I don't think I've heard that, Florgeborge. And welcome back. I don't remember if I said that. Moxie says, what about the Death Rites, the Death Poker? That's pre-Erdtree. Yeah, I definitely agree that the Deathbirds and whatnot are pre-Erdtree, but we just don't know if the catacombs are connected to the Deathrite birds beyond potential connections to Flame. Hey, Potato Poker, nice to see you again. Good luck getting ready for the DLC. Rosus has Talon feet, and his statues have the same posture as Deathbirds. You've seen it theorized they're repurposed statues. Blackman says, what faction makes the Stone Imps and Watchdogs come to life? We don't know. I think like the closest thing to those, the maker of that might be the maker of the Crystallians, which we also don't know about. And he seems to have been like long gone from the world if the Crystallians are just kind of like standing by and awaiting additional Crystallians. Florgeborg thinks this is at the bottom of the stairs. Oh, you mean like the camera's perspective and you're just like looking up? Yeah, I think that's the case. Well, no. So yeah, it seems like Marika would have been at the bottom to begin with, like by the womb thing, and this should be at the top because she like walked up the steps. A golem crafter employed a similar crystal tool. Okay, thank you, Eamon. So yeah, it does seem like the golem maker would have made the imps. And like the golem maker seems definitively pre-Erdtree. Maybe he was still around after the Erdtree. Maybe he just made a ton of imps and the Erdtree forces co-opted them. Maybe the imps were always affiliated with the catacombs and the Erdtree forces just assimilated all that stuff into their budding religion as well. Were the Wicker men made by the Golem makers? I don't know. I would kind of lean towards no, because at least the Wicker men have more omen horns, whereas like none of the golems have that kind of stuff going on. Natural's saying, from what you're hearing me say, because there's no evidence of spirit ashes before the shattering, therefore it's likely that there wasn't, and you feel that's reinforced by the game in the ashes being the only things that existed after the shattering. So let me just try to restate this, because I might not have said it as well as I would have liked. So yes, in this kind of weird instance, for now, until we get more information to confirm it, I can definitively say that of the spirit ashes that exist, we definitely know some were made post-shattering because of the spirit ashes of beings like Lutel, which are headless and are meant to guard soulless demigods. So that is certainly a post-shattering spirit ash. So like using that amongst some other spirit ashes as a baseline here, I can say if we try to look forward, we have no explicit confirmation that there were pre-Erdtree burial spirit ashes in that spirit ashes being ashes which have spirits in them that can still be summoned. So there's a possibility that before the shattering happened, the ashes could have still been being absorbed by the Erdtree, but we don't really know about that. It's possible that they might not have been, and some of these ashes could have been from like previous eras, but there's no explicit confirmation one way or the other. So as far as the spirit ashes are concerned, post-shattering, they definitely exist and were like made past that time. But before, I don't know, is kind of like the point. So there's just that ambiguity there. And Wet Bread, welcome on in. I agree with you there. No, I wasn't trying to ignore you. It's like sometimes I'll see a name and like think to talk, like say hello to somebody, but if chat keeps moving, I might get distracted, or if I like look into the video, you could just like come in at an inopportune time for me to say hello. Because it's since I've gotten like a lot more viewers since like the DLC news started breaking open, it's been a little bit of a task trying to stay on top of it, unfortunately. No idea, Mel. So I'm saying I think that the tree eats spirit and body and not just bodies. Yes, absolutely. At least originally. I don't know if it was like that after what I would consider the Golden Order's creation, or more specifically after the Shattering. Because we are told that in pretty much all of the spirit ashes, what? All right, maybe it's just not called Spirit Ash. What the hell? All right. Hold on, let me look for a more generic one. Oh, maybe it's Ronnie's dialogue. Okay. Yeah, it's just Ronnie's dialogue. Okay. So when you first get the spirit calling bell from Ronnie, she says she was entrusted this tis a bell for calling forth spirits. Summon them with it from ash unreturned to the Erdtree. I guess it's just ash unreturned. Anyway, I guess you could bring ash to the Erdtree, but the fact that it still has spirits within it, to me, definitely implies that the spirits should return to the Erdtree, which ties into all that stuff about a proper death of returning to the roots. Your soul will return to the Erdtree in time. So yeah, that's one of Dee's dialogues. There's a ghost. I don't remember exactly how he says it, but at least I have Dee's dialogue, which I can point to say that souls should be sucked up by the Erdtree. And not just the bodies. True Connoisseur says, technically Lutel could have been before the Shattering, right? If there was a decade or so where Deathroot became an epidemic before the Shattering. So the way that I would look at it would be, if there is that long of a time gap, sure, maybe that's arguable, but she's guarding a soulless demigod, so it's certainly after the Night of the Black Knives. So I don't know how distantly we can link up the Night of the Black Knives to the Shattering. It seems like the major difference to Mao between the Erdtree and the other death cultures is that the Erdtree immortalizes the spirits. So that might be a possibility, and a lot of that stuff is contingent on what you mean by immortalize and like the Erdtree specifically, because the Golden Order may have made it so that spirits are kind of immortalized on their own now, and because Deathroot exists and the Shattering happened and the Erdtree is disconnected from its roots, souls are no longer returning to the Erdtree, but they're still kind of immortal. So that might be a big problem if you are trying to build a tree that is sustained from souls. Hey Galamoth, yeah, that might be my theory, that America may have broken the ring to sever the connection from the roots to the Erdtree to prevent the return of destined death in the form of Deathroot. Yes, that is definitely a thought I've shared before. Greg says it reminds you of the Jellyfish Sisters wanting to see the stars, like a sad calling for a final rest. Oh no. Alright, let's go back to Smo's video.
Perhaps the Erdtree requires further blood sacrifice in order to function, and this is why there is a whole infrastructure built around feeding it at its roots. These burial practices, the catacombs, and associated beliefs could all be mechanisms meant to deliver bodies to the roots of the Erdtree, a continual supply of blood sacrifices. It also makes me think of Micha. We know from the Halig Tree Crest Surcoat item description that Micha watered the Halig Tree with his own blood in an attempt to create his own Erdtree. Perhaps it's because he knew of this original event, and he knew that blood sacrifice was required to create an Erdtree. It's just that Micha wasn't willing to create the sacrifice necessary to create an Erdtree, and instead tried to circumvent it with his own Empyrean blood. There is, of course, another possibility, that this mound of flesh blended together is the Crucible, the primordial source of all life, where life was once all blended together, but we will talk about that possibility more in the next chapter of this video. With that said, let us now discuss the Shadowlands and the Kingdom Within.
Alright, so Florgeborge might be starting to get on what I've been putting down for a long time. And he says, what if the reason death was removed was because the Erdtree needed constant life force / spirit / blood to function, and that's why Erdtree burial was a thing. They can never die, and the Erdtree no longer requires a mass genocide if destined death is removed. So I added a little bit to what I believed his thought was at the end there. So why do you think Godfrey's had like a crisis of identity after he defeated everyone he could? And that could just be like, you know, a personal machismo type thing where he just doesn't have anybody around in the world to like keep him anchored to it, because he doesn't have a raison d'etre, a reason to exist. And setting all that stuff aside, if the Erdtree does actually grow from death to some degree, then how sustainable is that model when you've conquered everything? Is kind of the big question. And it's not even just like that the Erdtree needs death. It seems to need more specific kinds of like people who've fallen in battle seems to be the best offering for the Erdtree, which might relate to why there was like the Crucible and the Colosseums around in Godfrey's age, but no longer in Radagon's. I don't know why I didn't put that point in my video. Like I said, when I made my like super long list, there was probably stuff that I was forgetting. So anyway, that's why I tend to believe that the Rune of Death was probably removed after Godfrey's time and towards like the beginning of Radagon's, because they were transitioning systems, not necessarily because they needed to switch away from like a system of mass genocide, but because the Erdtree stopped producing its bounties. And we don't know why exactly that was. It could have been a natural course of life. It could have been because they ran out of people to continue to feed the Erdtree with, but for whatever reason, removing destined death, or at least studying the Golden Order, was supposed to alleviate such problems. All right, so let me scroll back up. It's just a mother's love. I would disagree with that take, Natural, because Godwyn shouldn't have had a soul. It should have been destroyed. Yeah, and as Eamon brings up the branch sword quote, that kind of like talks about what I mean about like needing to die in battle, because you need to cling tenaciously to life to render up a death worth offering. Gold is literally the microplastics of the lands between. For real though, man, like unironically. Scowleezy said Deathroot is like fungus to the Erdtree's tree. Yeah, that's probably a pretty good comparison. Drew asks, was Godfrey the leader of the Knights of a previous era? Is the seduction mentioned Marika stealing Godfrey over to her side? Those are very good questions. I do think there is a strong possibility that Godfrey could have had or won knights from a prior age. If any would fit that bill, I would definitely say it would be the Banished Knights. And there's also some questions about the Crucible Knights, depending on like how one feels about the Crucible and whatnot. Like, if you think the Crucible is unaffiliated with Godfrey and Marika, then did Godfrey and Marika just defeat the Crucible Knights, and then the Crucible Knights are like, damn, we got our asses beat. This dude's strong. I'm going to follow him. I mean, that's a very strong possibility, especially with Muriel saying all things can be conjoined. So, anyway. Wet asks, what are my thoughts on the woman kneeling in the trailer being the Gloam-Eyed Queen? I don't know if we just saw the photo of it, if that's why you're asking. I mean, it's kind of like one of the memes of like, is this a butterfly? And I feel like whenever we see any vaguely feminine character, we kind of want to know if she's the Gloam-Eyed Queen. So, is it a possibility? Definitely. But I think that's pretty much all I can say about it. It's a possibility. I don't feel as though I have enough info to say one way or the other. Alright, let's go back into the video. Hey Panthea, nice to see you again. You know, doing the lore stuff. How about you?
So now that we're past the first two lines of the trailer, let's move on to the next two. Whatever this event was and whatever happened, it was an affair from which gold arose, and with it, shadow. Now, in my prior video on the Shadow of the Erdtree gameplay trailer, we highlighted the fact that the Shadowlands are not just a dream place, for example, because they have their own culture and people. In an interview with Famitsu, Miyazaki confirmed that the dancing dragon boss, showcased in both trailers now, is a remnant of the culture that once lived in the Shadowlands, the culture that was obliterated in the war. Underneath the dancing dragon is the Omen, identifiable in the gameplay trailer from their feet, which have a similar model to Margit, as well as the various Omen horns that we can see protruding from its body. This is of course the Lands Between version of the Chinese dancing dragon, in which multiple people would be underneath a sort of costume to mimic the movements of a dragon, and indeed it seems like there's more than one person underneath this dancing dragon. And so this was a society that was advanced enough that they'd had their own cultural practices and beliefs. And most interestingly, it's Omen that are beneath this, suggesting it's an Omen civilization. In general, there seems to be quite a bit of focus on Omen-themed enemies in this DLC, with some others being glimpsed in the gameplay trailer, and a recent tweet from the official game Twitter showed a new, exciting Omen-looking boss. I think it's therefore likely, and almost certain at this point, that the prior civilization in these Shadowlands, the ones described by Miyazaki that were destroyed in the war, were a Crucible civilization. One of the many interesting details in this new story trailer is that we can see Marika's runes sort of embedded in this tree.
So yeah, just to touch on the Omen stuff, as I've brought this up on a couple of the other analyses and whatnot, I have wondered whether or not the kind of timeline of the Shadowlands is analogous to the timeline of the Lands Between, and whether or not these are fully relics of a prehistoric age, or if just like the practitioners of such an age could have changed over time due to influences by like the Erdtree or other cultures. So with that being said, I do think there's a very, very, very strong possibility that the Omen type people could be predating the Erdtree with like the horn iconography and everything. But I won't be completely taken off guard if that is not entirely the case. Natural asks, is it possible that the act of destined death is not necessarily the destruction of the solar body, but the severing of the two? When Godwin and Rodney died, they glitched it, splitting the results. It's really hard to state, especially because we don't really know what destined death is to begin with. Believe it or not, we don't know. So some people think that destined death could be total oblivion, and because it got like sharded in half with Godwin and Ronnie's stuff, that might be like why each half of them died, but not either wholly. So anyway, what else is going to say about destined death? Oh, yeah. So learning more about Unmei and it being a kind of fate that is changeable. I don't know if I've said this on stream, but I started to wonder this, at least in the Discord, is that if Unmei implies a fate that can be changed, was destined death used in such a way that it would change somebody's fate so that way it could go into the Erdtree or something like that? Or another system? So is destined death just related to destiny more so than death, if that makes sense? Jay Moore says, Omen and Dragons is pretty big. That it's a dragon dancer is such a good twist. Maybe there'll be something with the creation of the Erdtree and the death of the Omen culture. Yeah, I feel like Mesmer might be kind of the death of the Omen culture with this trailer. Yeah, it could be the death of someone's destiny, perhaps.
And the Shadowlands seem to be getting pulled up towards the rune, as if Marika's power is draining the Shadowlands or this tree. Miyazaki commented on the spatial nature of the Shadowlands in an interview with IGN, where he said the following. First of all, the setting of Shadow of the Erdtree is a brand new land. It's a brand new map, separate from the lands between. It is a land that is overshadowed by the particular shadow of the Erdtree, as opposed to the Erdtree in the lands between, and it takes place again on an entirely separate, physically separate map, so it will involve a warp of sorts to get there. In terms of setting and theme, it technically occupies the same space as the lands between, the same universe. But due to something story related that we won't reveal today, this has become physically disconnected, and you'll travel to the Shadow of the Erdtree land as a separate place. So a lot of what Miyazaki says here begins to make sense when you consider that with gold came shadow. In that quote, Miyazaki says that this area, the Shadowlands, is overshadowed by the particular shadow of the Erdtree as opposed to the Erdtree. This means that this tree is called Shadow of the Erdtree. It is the Erdtree's shadow. As gold was created, so was its shadow. As the Erdtree was created at the same moment, this Shadow of the Erdtree was created. There is a...
And so we were talking about the semantics of this the other night. Maybe it was last night, whatever. Hold on, let me get a good photo. So is this entire entity supposed to be thought of as one tree, or is it still technically two trees? Is the one that looks more reminiscent of the actual Erdtree the Shadow Tree, and do we have another figure here? And then we saw some like weird thorns growing on the background in a different promotional shot. So maybe there's a third tree that's unaccounted for. So yeah, I still don't know pretty much anything about that situation. Yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. Hey, Lucid Ether, welcome on in. More Burke Gore's details in Elden Ring. Oh, yep. It wouldn't be an Elden Ring stream without any references to Burke. And Wet says, the Japanese translation kind of confirms that the trees are sides of the same coin. Yeah. Rob says, the tree stuff is the most confusing, honestly. All right. I feel like there's a lot of confusing things, but you might be entitled to say that.
Of the Erdtree. It is the Erdtree's shadow. As gold was created, so was its shadow. As the Erdtree was created at the same moment, this Shadow of the Erdtree was created.
And as I was saying on like my reactions and whatnot, I don't know whether or not gold is a reference to the Erdtree and shadow is a reference to death or destined death, or if gold could be a reference to the grace of gold and shadow is still death, I guess. So curious to see which one of these theories are going to come out on top, or if they're all going to fall flat on their face. Eamon asks, hang on, Erdtree Shadow, cast by the sun, the land of the sun? This is possible that this place could be the Sun Realm. I know many people think it's Fair Missoula, especially because the sun literally never sets in Fair Missoula, but who's to say that Fair Missoula may not have been part of here as well? But yeah, I don't necessarily know though, because thinking about the sun stuff even more, like we have seen the Shadowlands have its own moon and a night cycle. So maybe Fair Missoula would still be the better thematic location for the Seat of the Sun. Even if like the building on the Sunrealm shield doesn't match anything in Fair Missoula. Mao doesn't think shadow in this context is the rune of death. Alright.
The same moment, this shadow of the Erdtree was created. There is a strong tradition of duality within Elden Ring's story and themes, a world that exists in balance between opposing forces, and thus it isn't surprising that with the creation of the Order of Gold, a world of shadow must also exist. This CGI trailer also made it clear that these lands look even more like Leyndell than I first assumed. When you see the scene of Mesmer standing over the city while he burns it, this city pretty much is Leyndell, down to the wall that surrounds the city. At the end of the war segment of the cinematic trailer,
to be fair, I do think there are a few more relief sculptures on the walls in the Shadow City, but nonetheless, I definitely get huge Leyndell vibes from the area.
We see that the top of the city is almost bleeding into the rune and the shadow of the Erdtree above, almost as if the top of this world is bleeding, and that this is where the two worlds meet, and that this world is being drained into the lands between. So what is actually happening here, and what is the relationship between the Shadowlands and the lands between? Well, I think symbolically, we are certainly meant to see the Land of Shadows and its city as a mirror or inversion to Leyndell, its shadow. It's hard not to look at these lands side by side, the cities side by side, and see this as an inversion of one another. Two cities, two trees, one gold, one shadow. And to me it's seeming more and more as if these Shadowlands are a sort of consequence to the creation of gold. I think that Leyndell and these Shadowlands are a mirror of each other. One cannot exist without the other. And that they were both created at the moment that Marika created the Erdtree. This is what I'm...
So I would kind of disagree with this assessment here, because we're told this is the place where Marika first alighted, where she first set foot, whatever you want to call it. And then this is the place also where she became a god. So how could she do this all in a place that had yet to exist if it wasn't split with the Erdtree here? So I think there's probably a little bit more there.
Leaning towards anyway. However, if these Shadowlands were created at the moment that Marika created the Erdtree, then how do we reconcile that with what I have just discussed? How do we explain the rich culture of the Omen people that is symbolized by the dancing dragon?
Ooh, so Smotown's shooting his own self in the foot. That's fun. Alright, I'm curious to hear what he says now.
Well, there are a few possibilities. It could be that the Omen civilization was once the original one that sat where Leyndell once did. But after Marika's ritual, she displaced them and it became the Shadow Realm to the Realm of Gold. And Leyndell took its place, and it's why they are so closely mirrored after one another. Both sit.
Okay, so he might be implying that they're like actual mirrors. I thought he was just like speaking figuratively here. So yeah, I wouldn't take it to be like too literal, but anyway. All right, Forge Board, you have a good night, and thanks for joining as always. Yeah, that's how it be sometimes.
Cities, walled cities, with a tree hanging above them. Perhaps the reason that Leyndell so closely mirrors the city shown in the trailer is because this city was once the seat of civilization, but it was displaced to this new realm thanks to Marika's actions. Afterwards, Marika built her own city under the Erdtree, mimicking the design of the one we see in the Lands of Shadow. Thus we would have the twin cities, one of shadow and one of gold. The Greater Will's ability to displace cities is not exactly a new idea. Remember, the Nox were once banished underground for their trespasses against the Greater Will. I'm generally of the school of thought that the Eternal Cities once sat on the surface, directly above where they sit now underground, and that they were somehow magically displaced by the Greater Will's power. It isn't therefore too outlandish to believe that the Shadowlands once sat where Leyndell did, and they were inverted or displaced to this shadow dimension after Marika's ritual.
So I'm not gonna lie, I legitimately try to avoid thinking about this as much as possible because it's so headache inducing. It doesn't ever really seem to get anywhere. But thinking about the line in the trailer now about seduction and more specifically betrayal, I wonder if the betrayal could line up with the creation of the Shadowlands and the Nox and the Finger Slayer blade somehow. But I honestly don't even want to begin trying to wrap my head around that kind of situation. So I'm just going to offer it here tantalizingly for now and just kind of like leave it there. Mao thinks the land of shadow was veiled when this Erdtree was born. Yeah, so if it was veiled, that's one thing, but Smo is making it sound like the Shadowlands were like created, which I think is a bit of a different nuance there. You'd like to point out the impaled lion dragon dance figures could just be their heads, since they each have the long cloaks, which you assume are the other parts. You assume the other parts don't have. So some of these have the heads on them. I don't know about all of them, but there is at least one body with each head and each stake. Greg asks, what if the betrayal is the Knight of the Black Knives? So do you think it's possible the Finger Slayer blade was like the blade that Ronnie would have used on Godwin? I know like you didn't say that. I'm just trying to understand the point of like how the Finger Slayer blade would fit into everything. Could it have been used against A fingers? A2 fingers? I don't know. You meant head as in lead. Okay, let me reread that. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I always pictured, and we'll probably see more in a second here.
Crucible civilization that existed in this area.
So yeah, I think we have like three main leads, and then we have the corresponding bodies, which would go like 6 total, I think there were, rather than 9. But I don't know. But it kind of looks like 4. I can't tell if this has horns on it. Anyway. Yeah, and as Black Man says, the Finger Slayer Blade's origins are unclear, which is why I mention it, and I don't even want to try to entertain it, because it's just, it goes everywhere and nowhere real quick, real fast.
Before was displaced with it. And this possibility seems even more likely when you consider some of the quotes from Miyazaki's interviews about the DLC. In one, he described the Land of Shadow as physically disconnected, which to me could certainly imply that these lands once sat where Leyndell did, before being inverted or cast into their own dimension. Of course, it's all just speculation at this point about a rather esoteric story point, and so we'll just have to wait for the DLC to find out the truth. Either way, my belief is this. that the Shadowlands were once the centre of civilization and home to the Crucible Order, and potentially an unknown god and Elden Lord. Marika initially befriended this order before stealing its power and banishing the Omen civilization to this alternate shadow dimension.
So I'm really curious how Smotown feels about that in relation to everything with the ancient dragons and Placidusax. Maybe he thinks there's a middle between Placidusax and Godfrey, and this kind of civilization would go along with that. Which, I mean, he did kind of bring that up earlier, but I just might not be fully remembering his points there.
Then came the Purge. Mesmer, Marika's demigod child, was charged with making sure the Shadowlands would remain a distant memory. However, a purge on this scale and of such violence would have been better left hidden from the annals of history. This was a bloody and distasteful war that would happen in the shadows, away from the prying eyes of the public. To reaffirm that it's a Omen civilization that is purged, we see the Lion Dancer briefly clash with Mesmer. Again, reiterating the words of Miyazaki, these Lion Dancers are a remnant of a civilization that was destroyed in this war, and given they are Omens piloting this dragon underneath it, means this was an Omen civilization that has been destroyed in this story trailer. And I do find it very interesting that these dancing dragons are somehow used as weapons of war, and I'm sure we'll certainly get a taste of that in the relevant boss battle. But let's talk about what this means for the Omen, because I've always really enjoyed the lore of the Omen, but they feel a little bit lacking in the origins of their people, as well as what happened before the Golden Order. And it would make sense if a huge aspect and huge part of their history had been erased by the Golden Order. We know that the Omen come about through contact with the Crucible, and given the Crucible was the dominant force before Marika and the Erdtree, it makes sense that the Omen would be very present during this era. I've gone back and forth on my views on the Crucible, but if you've watched my latest lore catch-up video, which is the full story rounded up, and I'd highly recommend that if you're wanting to catch up on the story, I suggested that the Crucible had essentially been around since the beginning of time, and I'd simplified my views on the Crucible. And so we have to answer an interesting question. Is the bloody mass that we talked about in the first part of this video the Crucible? And I do think it's extremely likely. We know that the Crucible was a place where all life was blended together, and in these bloody masses we see that there's a lot of people kind of stuck or glued together. Is this the Crucible that is changed by Marika using this power of gold? It could be, but it wouldn't explain why the Crucible is depicted as a tree by Siluria's spear for...
Okay, yeah, I was about to bring that up. I was like literally doing my Control F search on my other monitor screen.
Example, and Siluria's helm. However, it is something interesting to ponder. Whether or not this bloody mass is the Crucible or just a pile of sacrifices, as I suggested before, what is clear is that the Crucible will have been the force up until this moment, and thus it makes sense that an Omen civilization would have risen in the time before Marika. We know from items like the Crucible Knot Talisman that anything Crucible related used to be considered divine, and this is that time, the time of the Omen Kingdom, when being touched by the Crucible was seen as a good thing.
So I've kept my mouth closed and my been biting my tongue for a little bit here. So as far as the whole Crucible Knot stuff goes, for anybody who's unfamiliar with my channel, I believe that the Crucible is literally the Erdtree, the ancient Erdtree during Godfrey's time, more specifically. And I feel like this reference to de-evolution, however you pronounce it, would imply that you need a base point to return to, because why would it be de-evolution if you're already in the before times? That is one of many reasons why I tend to think the Crucible came later. But anyway, I just kind of wanted to bring that up since that kind of bothered me, I guess. Wet Bread says, the lightning of the Omen Dancers seem to have somewhat of an affiliation with the dragons. It does really bother me that they have lightning and that it's yellow lightning more so than red lightning, but for what it's worth, like the practitioners of Dragon Communion, or the Cult of Dragon Communion, or no, just is it just the Dragon Cult Church? Whatever they're called, the Lanedell Knights, they also use yellow lightning, so dragons don't necessarily guarantee a connection to red lightning. But maybe Smoketown's right for saying that these lion dancers are actually dragon dancers, and maybe that's why they can summon lightning. I guess I never really thought about it in that kind of frame before. Global said, if we replace all of the mentions of Omen in the Shadowland with Misbegotten, it makes Radagon's connection to the Leonine Misbegotten a little more palpable. If we change the game, guys, it'll be different. Lucid, are you just asking if we know of like the cut content relating to Asimi? If so, at the very least I do, but I can't speak for everyone in chat. Ancient Dragon Cult, thank you, Rob. Alright.
The Omen Kingdom, when being touched by the Crucible, was seen as a good thing, before its history was erased. And it would make sense of why the Omen are treated so brutally by the Golden Order now. They are remnants of the prior dynasty and civilization. They are reminders of the brutal extermination and the bloody foundations.
I caught Smo slipping. He has his LODs. We got a clip an Omen back here. He's too far away with the camera.
They are reminders of the brutal extermination
look at that.
and the bloody foundations on which Marika's kingdom rests. Again, I think of that image of the Land of Shadows bleeding into Marika's rune. This is the point where the two worlds meet, at least that's my opinion. And perhaps this is how the taint of the Omen is still able to creep into the lands between, coming from the shadow of the Erdtree. I've always wondered about certain elements of the curse of the Omen as well. If they were once revered in the time of the Crucible...
Cursed Omen, that's a cursed Omen right there.
Then what about the obvious negatives of their condition? The Omens suffer as a people, not just at the hands of brutal oppressors, but because of their own blood. The Omen smirk mask worn by the Omen killers has some really interesting lore, as it reads the following. Bears the smirking face of an elder, twisted in wicked delight. This visage is carved in the image of the evil spirits that haunt the Omen in their nightmares.
Elder. Alright, I'm gonna look this stuff up while Smoke keeps talking.
Spirits haunt the Omen, and I have theorized in the past that this is the reason that we see sleeping Omen thrashing in their sleep. They are being haunted by these spirits in their dreams. They can never rest easy. But why? There is something in the Omen blood that gives it true power. They are able to wield their blood as a weapon. It can be used to coat their blades in flame, and also can be used as a sort of magic missile. There is true power in their blood, and in the past I had just compared it to the vile bloods of Bloodborne. That Omen blood is simply more vile, potent, and concentrated than human blood, and I do believe this is certainly still the case. However, what if those spirits that haunt their nightmares is a sort of shared memory, a collective unconscious, a shared trauma, that they suffer because they are disconnected from the shadow of the Erdtree, and that they all have this collective unconscious memory of the tyranny of Mesmer and the slaughter.
So, trying to do some like preliminary research, I don't think this is as conclusive as I would want it to be. So the Omen Smirk mask just talks about Rologene, like an old person, and that isn't necessarily related to the imp mask, but it might be, because we have Choro, so like a super old, I guess. But maybe they're related. So like what I'm saying here is that there is still the potential that the elders of the imps heads might be related to the elders of the Omen Smirk masks. The terms are close enough where I could see the connection, but they're yeah, I'm gonna try to like look into the elder stuff a bit more. Not that there's like really much beyond the stupid ass imp and the Omen Smirk mask, but I was just wondering if like elder here is a what's the word? Not euphemism. Not moniker. If it's just like another word for the ancient civilization that would have existed with the omens. But if so, it's not like there's not a lot to build off of, and I'm kind of doubtful, essentially. Mao says, you have a problem with this because the Golden Order doesn't outright kill omens as they're born, as you would expect by such hated creatures. I don't know how to address that right now. Like, I don't disagree, but it's just kind of hard to gather my thoughts. Eamon says, maybe they're cursed by spirits now, only because the only spirits that can enter them are those cursed by order, and the rest go to the Erdtree. Maybe in the age before the Omen had normal spirits. Yeah, I don't really know about that, but the idea that they could be cursed after the fact is interesting. But I think that doesn't work super well with the idea of... Oh, I've got an idea. Anyway, so what I was going to say before I got interrupted by my own thoughts rudely is that because we have Omen Baron that are born as like omens with the horns, it makes me think that the like curse stuff doesn't come later and it's like a, you know, a natal thing. But then I was thinking like, wait, then how exactly do they get cursed? And then, all right, so setting aside the issues of like timeline continuities, Crucible, Erdtree, all that stuff aside, for a moment, let's just go with the idea that, you know, souls get funneled into the Erdtree. It produces blessings, which gets distributed to people by like Marika in her order originally. Or maybe there's an order that did something similar to this process before Marika's time. So with that out of the way, what would happen if you gave a woman these kind of blessings? Where do these blessings come from? The dead, kind of like the souls of the dead, essentially. That's pretty, you know, apparent when you like really dig through everything. So these women could potentially have the remnants of life that is not native to them, and when they get pregnant, that excessive life might also get distributed into the children, and that might go on to explain the malady which inflict the omen through the cursed blood. Although, if that's the case, I'm curious why we don't really hear too much more about the cursed women. Maybe it's because of like the way that they get blessed by this extraneous life force. I don't know. Just kind of one idea that comes to mind. And hey, Slaker52, welcome to the stream. Gold and shadow omen spells are gold and black. Interesting. Maybe. Eamon thinks the omen are connected to the ancestral spirits, which seemingly absorb souls and grow horns as a result. Well, the thing is that they're born that way. Like the little babies, which isn't to say like they couldn't get that way from their mothers. You might be right about that. But then like, I guess we would need to see what kind of life would have also existed at the same time as the omen. Because they might have been like the only life forms in the world. Or I guess like the Newman would screw that up. Because like one thing that's bothered me is like, why isn't Godfrey an omen, but Moog and Morgott are? So maybe he could be Newman. Yeah, I don't know. Isn't there an imp that looks like the old man in the portrait with the pregnant woman? I don't necessarily think he looks like that, although I think that dude in the portrait's brooch kind of resembles what you can see on the Erdtree burial watchdog staves, the croziers, whatever you call them. You wouldn't want to feed tainted gold back into the tree. You wouldn't want to kill your children. So not only that, I think it's pretty well hinted that if you kill an omen, people are concerned that they will be able to curse other people. And the way to avoid such curses is to not have emotions of your own, which is why the omen killers took those concoctions to rid themselves of emotion. Because when you're on the verge of death, like, you'll cling closely to life, and that will allow your body to kind of get that extra juice in it to like leave a memory. And that's kind of like what curses are to an extent. I don't know if they're memories, but they're certainly like masses of heightened emotions. And I don't remember what source that comes from. I might just be pulling from my knowledge of Dark Souls and Bloodborne, but I'm pretty sure there's still something in Elden Ring. Oh, no, I remember. It's the familial rancor of the family heads, or whatever they're called. All right, so familial rancor states, the anguish of a spouse and child invites accursed wrath. So we could take from this description that anguish equals wrath equals wraiths and stuff like that, which is a kind of negative emotion brought about due to death stuff. Eamon thinks Godfrey is part giant. I guess like the giants aren't omen-like. Maybe that would be another thing to consider, that we have trolls and giants and the Zamorians who should be pre-Erdtree, but they're also not omen-like, which is part of like one of the reasons why I don't think the Crucible was as much of a thing as many people do as far as like the pre-Erdtree times are concerned. Yes, I'm saying the Omen Killers are like Hollow Knights without horns. Not says, you think the emotion thing is about killing the babies? To be honest, omens are probably mostly killed as children by the way of removing the horns. I think there's multiple parts to it, because like the omens themselves are hunted if they're above ground. Only the ones without the horns are permitted. Because I don't exactly see the omen killers as like killing the babies, which isn't to say they didn't do it, but I thought it was like that the mothers did it, and that's why they made the effigies, so that way they wouldn't get blamed. The Juzo statues, or whatever they call them. Mao says, maybe the omens are hosts of spirits like mini Erdtrees themselves, where they have angry spirits on their bodies. I think that's possible, and if we want to give a comparison to the Erdtree specifically, if anybody isn't like on board with that idea, I would point to the ulcerated tree spirits having the kind of excessive vestigial tendrils on their abdomens, similarly to the way that Rykard has hands and tendrils growing out of his body. Hey, Mr. Yada. Yeah, I don't know like what the deal is with the birth of the omens, because like Morg and Mogat. Yep, Morg. That's what I said.
Of their people. The title of Shadow of the Erdtree is certainly a play on words. It is expressing the darkness that was created as a consequence of the Erdtree, as well as the crimes upon which its empire is built. It's not just a reference to the shadow of the Erdtree, the physical tree that lies over the Shadowlands. And with that said, let us talk about that darkness. Let's talk about the Shadowlands War, which was the centerpiece of this cinematic trailer. The images in the trailer show us enough. Mesmer leads a massive army to lay waste to the civilization that preceded the Erdtree. The slaughter, of course, must have taken place in the Shadowlands, for such a brutal war could never have been hidden from the public otherwise.
Definitely agree with that, with what Smotown is saying. Oh yeah, and then Gregory kind of reminds me of another point why I think the Crucible comes later. And Gregory says, Godric could also tie into that tendril idea and why he grafted so many arms onto himself. So if Godric is kind of idealizing most explicitly the age of Godfrey then why all this obsession with grafting? It's because I think that shows a time back when all life was being filtered together, which is more closely associated with the Crucible to me and the Erdtree than like a prehistoric time. Or pre-Erdtree time, rather.
And at the end, in the final shot of Mesmer, the camera does indeed pan up and we see we are in the Shadowlands underneath the shadow of the Erdtree. For those who missed my gameplay trailer analysis video, Mesmer is almost certainly the child of Marika. In an interview, Miyazaki refers to him as another demigod, and in Elden Ring the demigods are generally the children of Marika. Additionally, the dialogue from the gameplay trailer, Mesmer refers to Mother, questioning whether the Tarnished are the right choice for the throne, and this Mother therefore is most likely Queen Marika, meaning that Mesmer is most likely perpetrating this slaughter on behalf of his mother. But why did it happen? Well, of course the main overarching reason is to secure Marika's power. If this kingdom was still powerful and was a remnant of the previous power, the Crucible, it could prove to be a threat to her power base. And as we know, the early days of the Erdtree were ones of war, where Marika and her consort Godfrey waged war against any potential rivals, including the Fire Giants. Does it not make sense that she would start with the extermination of the previous ruling order? The protection of the Erdtree incantation tells us that in the beginning, everything was in opposition to the Erdtree, but through countless victories in war, it became the embodiment of order. Perhaps we now know why everything was in opposition to the Erdtree, because it basically supplanted an already existing order. Mesmer's flame is impressive and draconic. In the shot of him standing over the city, he unleashes his flame, and it seems to snake around, as if it has sentience, as if it is mimicking a dragon or a snake. As I mentioned in my prior trailer video, he clearly has a draconic eye, and this is even clearer in this trailer.
So we've been talking about this on the Discord for a while, but as far as the draconic eye goes, for the Tarnished at least,
clearly has a draconic eye, and this is even clearer in this.
When they perform Dragon Communion and get their golden slitted eye, they also attain black sclera. So rather than having the quote-unquote whites of the eyes, they have blacks of the eyes. And Mesmer's eye still seems to have white on the outside. So he might not be a Dragon Communion partaker, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he might not be connected to dragons at all.
This trailer, really reinforcing the potential that he was the first Dragon Heart cultist, devouring their hearts to steal their power, and unleashing it on a scale never seen by us before. As mentioned before in that prior trailer analysis video, Mesmer's getup is very much like the Drake Knight set, and I think we are perhaps seeing the first dragon cultist, and that those who followed were inspired by the power he was able to attain through the vile act of eating dragon hearts.
Ding Dong asks, what if there's a serpent communion thing going on? I immediately just thought of Rykard. I'm like, oh, so he's doing the opposite of Rykard and eating the snakes? Well, I don't know. I mean, you could definitely say there's a kind of communion because he does seem to be sharing parts of his body with snakes, perhaps. But yeah, I don't know. Is dragon cultist, is that the right term to use there? Did I say that? I might have said it. Or maybe Smo said it. Yeah, I tend to think of when I say dragon cultist, rather than, you know, like Skyrim stuff, communion followers. Oh, Smotown did? Maybe he does like the same thing that I do then. And yeah, Scowleasy also points out that somebody on the Discord, I'm so sorry, I'm really bad at remembering who says what all the time. I should look it up. Also thinks that Mesmer's eye could look like the rune arc in, not the rune arc, but the the Elden Rune in America's Sword Seal and Scar Seal, and we just don't see the top of his eye to like make it apparent. Hey, Intellect, nice to see you again. Thank you. And Angry Age. Dragon Communist? Okay, Eamon.
As with the first portion of the trailer, there is a real ominous vibe given off by this segment of the trailer. It is dark, brooding, bloody, and brutal. Unlike the War of the Shattering, there are no soldiers here with proud livery and banners. The soldiers here all wear cloaks and masks. They are executioners, undertaking a bloody task. There is no glory.
That's an interesting perspective on it.
And there is no honour here. As an aside, in a Twitter image that showed the Sins of War golem, which we will discuss shortly, we do also see a...
It's Mitchell, guys.
Knight and a soldier following alongside it. These soldiers do line up with the forces that we see in the trailer, with dark armour.
So this is a better angle of that sigil then, so maybe that doesn't really line up with some other stuff. In some ways, this kind of reminds me of what that old dude is pierced with, or like the candles that the omen-looking like ladies wield, but probably is going to end up being something completely different.
And cloaks. Additionally, the knight that is on horseback in this image has a coat of arms on the horse's armour that sort of look like a candlestick. Now, this livery doesn't match up with Mesmer's coat of arms, as we see that clear as day on the collector's edition box. So what is this? The candlestick could match up with this character from the first trailer. Perhaps a saint who was also involved in the purge? And perhaps that's the same saint that is shown in the painting from the gameplay reveal trailer, showing that this is an important character who perhaps perpetrated the purge alongside Mesmer. Ultimately,
Man, the actual quality of that footage was extremely good. I didn't even know you could zoom in and still have the brooch remain that clear there. All right.
Perhaps perpetrated the purge alongside Mesmer. Ultimately, I just think this is a special division or force, the Shadowland Brigade if you will, decked out in black to represent the Shadowlands and their dark duty. But let's talk about these wicker basket enemies that are also shown in the image, the Sins of War, that absolutely stole the show for me in the trailer. I love these scenes of them towering over the city and reducing it to ash.
So I just had a thought that this woman might be the pregnant lady we saw in the painting before. I mean, I don't fully buy it, but if we want to give a potential identity other than the Gloam-Eyed Queen, we might have one. But I guess like her braid tassel type thing might not add up.
I love these scenes of them towering over the city and reducing it to ash. We do learn a little flavour about these enemies thanks to the aforementioned tweet that has their image. This image was accompanied by a quote that said, "The sordid sins of war still walk the realm of shadows, even as their victims search fruitlessly for recompense." These automatons...
I was like, why haven't I seen this? It's because it's on Twitter. Okay.
Clearly played a large role in this war, and they are filled with fire, like burning hot coals are within them. My instinct is that they are powered by this flame, perhaps Mesmer's flame, and they kind of remind me of the golems that we find throughout the mountaintops of the giants and throughout the lands between, in which they are also seemingly powered by fire, having furnaces within their stomachs. We know from the item description of the weapons dropped by these golems, the ones found in the base game, that they were created by a civilization now gone to ruin. Did Marika's forces take this design concept from an ancient civilization and make these sins of war? Either way, I will be interested to learn about these great wicker golems, but given they are referred to by the tweet as the sins of war, Suffice it to say, they were created for the express purpose of purging the lands of shadow. Miyazaki.
So Aben said in chat a moment ago, the sun face with the omen horns appears to be a mockery of an old object of worship made out of its followers' bodies. That's kind of how I always felt about the sun on it. It seemed a bit too, pun intended, I suppose, terrible pun intended, sunny for like what was going on with the Wicker Men. So to me, it felt like it was more or less mocking the situation, which now that we do have like more direct confirmation that the forces of Mesmer and the Wicker Men were like purging the lion dancers that have like the omen horn type stuff going on, I'm even more convinced that it seems to be like a made out of mockery to some degree. Or maybe it's a label to throw all the followers of whatever they are into it. It's like a gigantic trash can for them. Korn thinks Mesmer's nose and the Portraits Lady's nose look similar. I might need to double check that. And Jackson Weiss, nice to see you. Bloodstar symbolism, no thorns though. If you're talking about like Mesmer flames, I've wondered about that. I don't think it's quite there, but it is certainly reminiscent of it.
He himself also commented on these particular enemies, as in an interview with IGN he said the following in response to the interviewer asking him about these wicker basket enemies. Okay, so this giant basket of flame, as you so eloquently put it, Mitchell, was a terrible weapon.
No, that's in a positive phrase. The giant basket of flame is named Mitchell, Smo. Everybody knows that.
Used in a war that occurred in the Land of Shadow, basically. So again, without saying too much, we can't give away the name just yet officially, but yes,
it's Mitchell.
It was a really gruesome weapon that was used, and the kindling that you see is actually the remains of bodies that were put in there to burn. So there's that friendly fellow. So
oh, okay. So you're saying like the Wicker Men are kind of like the Bloodstar and turning into like blood sacrifices. Okay, yeah, that much I can agree with. And I think I floated that on the second time I was looking at the trailer on stream.
Lots of interesting information there. Firstly, Miyazaki says they cannot reveal the name of this golem as to not spoil the story, and this likely means the term Sins of War used on the tweet is not the official name of this enemy. And indeed, the term Sins of War isn't capitalized in the tweet, suggesting this isn't the name. Perhaps they will be named after the destroyed civilization, like the Omen Braziers, but only time will tell. Secondly, he tells us that these weapons are powered by corpses that are burned within them. So, building upon what I said previously, it likely means that these are beings that are powered by the fires within them. And now we know that corpses are the source of kindling for these great fires. It makes sense that a sort of blood sacrifice is needed to create these awful weapons. But of course, the greatest weapon that is unleashed upon the Shadowlands is Mesmer himself, and we see the scale of his power within this trailer, burning the majority of this civilization to ash. He really
So you guys thought the Fire Giants was bad enough and the Godskin duo were bad? Wait for the Wicker Man duo, the Mitchell duo.
Casts a brutal figure, leaning further into the Vlad the Impaler imagery, with a shot of him silhouetted against the lion dancers and others, all impaled upon stakes. He is the Hades of this mythology, part of the Pantheon, but the dark part, who exists in the underworld, separate from high Olympus. Indeed, he is awarded his own throne here, as if he is the king of the underworld. And again, I quote Miyazaki from an IGN interview, where he said, "You may have seen the end of the trailer. There was this key piece of art where it shows Mesmer sat in his throne-like chair, and people who have played the game may recognise this throne to be one of those from the boss room where you battle Morgott. And this represents the thrones at the base of the Erdtree, and it's supposed to symbolise that Mesmer stands on equal footing to these other demigods and children of Marika, who sat around in these thrones and held the rooms of the Erdtree."
So that's kind of confirmed that Mesmer has higher status than Moog, who has no throne.
so he is an important figure who rivals these other demigods. And as you play the DLC, you will learn a little about why he isn't featured in the legends of the Erdtree, the lands between. You realize why he exists in this shadow, the land of shadow. He is the Lord of the lands of shadow now, the tyrant who makes sure that these lands remain secure on behalf of Marika's regime. For those who didn't see my analysis video, there are a few other reasons I believe that Mesmer is part of the Pantheon, and everything he has done here is on behalf of Marika's Golden Order. First is that quote by Miyazaki I just read, where he equates Mesmer to the other demigods. His throne is also of Golden Order design. You can see it in the promotional material for the game.
Also, like, the flame on that promotional art is just really interesting to me. It kind of reminds me of the visual design of the Frozen Flame in Chrono Cross, but obviously this one is not static.
Order design. You can see it in the promotional material for the game. It matches the Elden Throne in Leyndell, suggesting he was granted this throne, his throne, by Marika's regime. Then, as Twitter user Dylan pointed out, the statue behind Mesmer shown in the gameplay trailer from a couple of months ago is likely that of Queen Marika. Miyazaki also finishes off that quote by saying you'll realise why he isn't featured in the legends of the Erdtree, why he exists in shadow. He isn't celebrated like the other demigods in the lands between, and that's because he has existed in this land of shadow. Not only this, but he committed an awful purge on behalf of the Erdtree Order. This is not something that the Erdtree Order and Marika would want to celebrate and make public. And thus he isn't a public figure. He isn't another demigod to be worshipped. Instead, Marika gave him a throne so that he might rule over the ashes that he created.
Sakorn had an interesting comment in saying that Mesmer might be the first in their prime demigod we fight in Elden Ring. How dare you slander Godric and Godfrey? They are definitely in their prime. No, but that is kind of an interesting observation there. I feel like Millennia could still kind of work, depending on, like, if you think her tie with Radahn means she's no longer in her prime. I could see that, but I mean, she also does kind of become a goddess, so it's kind of hard to say she wouldn't be in her prime anymore. Ding Dong thought that Mother was the formless mother since Mesmer's staff looks like Mohg's and his fire looks like Bloodflame. Yeah, with the statue of seemingly Marika behind him in Miyazaki's interview, I tend to believe his mother would definitely be Marika at this point. Although some people are thinking it could be the Glowmide Queen, but who's to say they're different? Wet says Morgoth's definitely in his prime. Mohg too. Yeah, that's a really good point. Definitely Mohg. Jackson asks, is Mesmer blind in one eye? Yes, so he does seem to have his left eye closed, similarly to Melina and Ranni. So there might be something going on there. Not says, try fighting Ranni. Ranni, checkmate, she is the strongest. She is. She can kill us by reminding us how bad our breath stank. She's truly the strongest demigod of them all. Micha be damned.
Before we discuss Micha, I do want to take a quick segue into something else that I want to discuss because of this trailer, and that is eyes. Something else I noticed in both of these trailers is Mesmer's eyes, one corrupted by Dragonheart consumption, and the other is sealed. But the sealed eyes of Ranni, Melina, and now Mesmer have always fascinated me. But it's something I've never had a full or satisfying answer for. I've always seen Melina's sealed eye opening during the Frenzied Flame ending as proof that she's the Glowmide Queen, not only because it is purple, i.e. gloam-coloured, but because this is the only scenario where she survives after the point that the Rune of Death is unsealed, and thus I think her eye is connected to its power. It is also unsealed as the Rune of Death is. However, this doesn't really explain why Ranni's eye is sealed. However, there is one thing that both Melina and Ranni share. they are both bodiless. And who else do we now know that is without a body? Micha. Micha gave up his very flesh in order to come to the land of shadows. In the announcement image for Shadow of the Erdtree,
Small might get to it, but on the off chance he doesn't, if you do look at the statues of Micha in Ordina, his left eye is closed. I now that I think about it, I should double check some of the statues in the Halig tree of him as like a little boy holding candles, because I don't remember if his eye is like goofy looking there. And hey, Ash King, nice to see you again. What says Melania has both of her eyes sealed by rot? Very well. V-Limit says, you believe it's the same asset? Don't quote you on that, though. All right, I'm going to quote you on that. Thank you.
Micha is shown riding Torrent. And whether you agree with Tim Diggity's excellent video that suggests Melina and Micha are one, the image alone implies that Melina must also have been in the Land of Shadows at some point to have taken Torrent. Torrent is also a spirit, and given Micha has to get rid of his body in order to travel to the Land of Shadows, my conclusion is that the Land of Shadows, now being spatially displaced, can only be travelled by those without a body, to those who exist in spirit only. Torrent, Micha, and Melina are all beings that we can presume have been to the Land of Shadows, and they are all beings without body. Thus, does it not also make sense that Mesmer would have to do the same? And what does Mesmer also share with Ranni and Melina? That
I feel like this is a pretty big leap, to be honest, because then, like, what about literally every other character we see in the Lands of Shadow? Right. So, hey, Mercy, nice to see you again. V-Limit says, outsmarted again. I feel like you just kind of walked into that one. It's the least cleverest of comebacks.
That's right, a sealed eye. Thus my new theory is that the sealed eye represents the death of the body, that this being is missing half of themselves. As for the Tarnished, how can they travel there? Well, the gameplay should tell you that
So yeah, as for the death of the body, that's an interesting idea, but then I think you would also need to reestablish why Melina's eye opens and then why her other eye is kind of dead. Is that still supposed to signify the death of her body? I just kind of took them to be as curses placed upon them by the gods, but I'm not sure about that.
Tarnished who are in possession of grace are no longer normal corporeal beings. They can resurrect from the dead. And we know that grace is the source of this power.
Sorry about that.
Thanks to an interview with Miyazaki in the book Overture of Elden Ring, where he said, the immortality of the Tarnished stems from the power of the guidance of grace. Tarnished that die outside the lands between are given new life through the guidance of grace and are beckoned to the lands between. This is basically the start of the game. I guess the guidance doesn't want the player to be freed. Additionally, we are able to travel through one point of grace to another, and we are also able to transport and travel to the pocket dimension known as the Round Table Hold. In short, the power of grace has given us the ability to travel through grace, and our body isn't corporeal.
Oh, I didn't try to stop it. Okay, buffered. Levo, thanks so much for the 10 gifted memberships. I appreciate that. How you doing, my man? So I asked if you wanted me to check out your video at the beginning of stream, not the end of it. But it looks like the end would have been better for you after all. Yeah, we've already checked out your video. I actually, unironically, really liked it. I did have some points that I disagreed with you about, or wanted to elaborate on. But overall, I think it was really well done, especially for a second video. Okay, you just watched the analysis and the replay. Thank you. It's really embarrassing on your part that you weren't able to attend this stream. I really appreciate the feedback, especially about the editing and audio balancing. No, absolutely. So yeah, if you ever need some more help, don't feel shy to ask me, because I would like people to learn from the things that I've learned along the way and get a bit of a leg up on past protagonists there. Laugh Entertainment, how's it going? Welcome in. It's symbolic as by it shutting, closing, or giving an eye weakens the body. You unlock the mind and magic power type stuff. I see what you're saying there. Basically a curse, but more symbolic. Okay. Right, so everybody who got memberships, congratulations. Mao, Angry Age, Nemo Namikaze, Paisan, Ghost Wizard, Dice Goblin, Charlie Foot, Mystikai, Lou Reed, Synthetic Teapot, and of course Levo with his own membership there. Enjoy the emotes. Not that I have very many. Which reminds me, I should probably like double check all my stuff and like maybe make more. Put maybe a little bit more effort into the channel. All right. Yeah, but once again, thank you so much for the 10, and glad you appreciated the feedback. I did like that video. All right, so what was I saying? Yeah, so the funny thing is like that influx of memberships came in as I like accidentally closed my other window. So I was super distracted trying to get everything back open because that's how I have to like close the stream essentially when I'm done. Eamon said you didn't think about Melina and the Land of Shadows. Interesting if true. And one thing that I really do wonder about the Land of Shadows is if it's supposed to be connected to what's described in the Helfen Steeple weapons description, in that it could be the Spirit Land, which I don't know, because like there's a lot of corporeal looking things. Miyazaki said it was physically disconnected. And we have like spectral tombstones, which is kind of weird. So maybe there's another place where spirits go beyond the Shadow Realm and the lands between, which seems like a good possibility at this point. Hey, thanks, Laugh Entertainment, or Laugh Entertainments. I appreciate that. So Without Horn asks, not many emotes? So it's been so long ago since I made the emotes, I don't remember how many slots I had. I believe I'd filled them up, but since the channel has grown, I don't know if that unlocks more. I am not the best content creator around, let's be real here. Not so great at that social media stuff. But okay, let's go back to the video. Alright, Shaman Lee.
In the normal sense. Thus, I think it's feasible that we will...
Okay, so no, it's still YouTube being a problem. So where are we at? 3741.
We'll be able to warp to these lands without shedding our body. That being said, the essence of grace might be irrelevant to how we're able to travel there, given there were some details in the gameplay trailer that hinted at how we travel to the lands of shadow.
Come now, touch the withered arm, and travel to the realm of shadow.
The female narrator in the gameplay trailer tells us to touch the withered hand in order to travel.
Damn, okay. I think it's having an auto buffering issue again. So if I keep it on one thing, maybe it'll be better. I'm just going to refresh it and catch up with what you guys are saying in chat. Of course, as soon as I get out of full screen. All right, I'm going to back up so that way Smotown's not so choppy and all that. All right, so Laugh asks, do I think we are starting at the beginning of time simultaneously as the main game is, or will we be in the simultaneously in that world, but after we beat the game time-wise? So let me try to think of what you're asking. Are you asking that... Do you think the timeline in the Shadowlands is going on at the same time as the base game? Or do you think they're disconnected? Is that kind of like your question? At least for the trailer itself, I think when you first see America, that might be like kind of one of the beginning events of the game. But I feel like when we go into the Shadowlands, it'll be present day, because that's been kind of confirmed by Miyazaki, because almost all of their DLCs at some point have either been in the past or dealing with like a segregated realm. And so he was a lot clearer this time around in saying that it wasn't dealing with like time travel, past or future. Greg asks, what if the Shadowlands are where the spirits of those who would go against the Erdtree or the Golden Order would go upon death, aka a symbolic hell? So I like that idea a lot. However, that does make me wonder about things which aren't necessarily rebelling against the Erdtree, but also aren't of the Erdtree's order. More specifically, things like the regal ancestral spirits and or Estelle, natural born of the void. So, maybe. Levo thinks the trailer is the birth of the Golden Order and Shadow is birthed at the same time. Didn't you say in your video, though, that you thought Radagon was kind of... the Golden Order was born after Godfrey's time? Have you changed your position on that? If the Golden Order is the absence of death, then the Land of Shadow must be the spirit world of the dead. Death was removed, overshadowed by the Golden Order. Laugh says, since we know time works the same in both lands, then the same amount of time has been passed in the main game as in the lands between. So that's what you're saying. Okay, yeah. So yeah, that's kind of the vibe that I get as far as what's going on at the Shadowlands. So I don't think that they were like cut off by time either. I do wonder, since we get all the like cutscenes of the war and whatnot, that there's going to be the Land of Shadows history that we're going to need to pick apart, as well as trying to compare that to what we know of the lands between. And then Blackman said, you thought you'd enter the Shadowlands through someone else's dreams, just as a way of crossing the barrier between realms. And that's another possibility, that there could be a break between a spirit realm and a dream realm, and or the Land of Shadows there. Levo thinks the timeline of the DLC is after Radagon and Merika's marriage because of Mesmer's red hair and the fire giant corpses. No, I get that, but you said you believe that you see the birth of the Golden Order in the trailer, but in the trailer it would presumably be towards like the birth of the Erdtree, and therefore kind of before like Godfrey's age concludes at the very least. So it seems like if the Golden Order comes later, then what you see at the beginning of this trailer kind of contradicts that thought. Einot thinks that people are reading too much into how the lands between and the lands of Shadow are separated. You imagine it's more of a different country separated by a magical barrier rather than different realities. I kind of get that vibe as well, but, you know, we'll have to wait and see. Greg says, you believe the ancestral spirits and the Estelles are more cosmic and therefore not really confined by special location or time, so either you think they can just exist wherever or wherever is warranted best for life. Okay. Paul and Primus, welcome to the stream. You think the outer gods controlling Merika made her do all this? Like the plucking of the hair from that body? What if we get a fight with the outer god? I don't necessarily think so, because it seems like to a very large degree, a lot of these orders are created by people's principles, ambitions, or however however Melina says it, with the principles we would follow when we level up. I kind of think that's what the mending runes are like, but as for the gods themselves, who knows? Laugh says, do you think where we start in the game will be starting the main game in the past at the same time as when we dropped in the game, or jump in the lands between at the same time when we beat the game? So I think it really depends on how we access the DLC, because if Radahn needs to be killed and Mohg needs to be defeated, then it seems like it would just be corresponding to the events of the game as the player is going through it. Because Miyazaki said he didn't want to include base game characters into the DLC because players could kill them. So it seems like there's a shared continuity of time between the main game and the DLC there. So I would disagree with Ding Dong's theory here that it's most likely the past of the Shadowlands, because that, I think, is what Miyazaki was saying that it was not going to be. All right. It's all good, laugh. Appreciate that. All right, let's go back to the video. All right, it's still buffering for 8 years.
Irrelevant to how we're able to travel there, given there were some...
Oh my god.
Being said, the essence of grace might be irrelevant to how we're able to travel there, given there were some details in the gameplay trailer that hinted at how we travel to the lands of shadow.
Come now, touch the withered arm and travel to the realm of shadow.
The female narrator in the gameplay trailer tells us to touch the withered hand in order to travel to the lands of shadow. If this is the corpse of Micha found in Mohg's bedchamber, then perhaps it now acts as a sort of bridge between the two worlds, given his...
You know, this almost seems to be like consistent, where it's really good for like the first couple hours of my stream, and then like after the 3 hour mark, it just craps out.
Corporeal form is in the lands between, and his spirit form is in the Shadowlands. Thus, he is split between the two different dimensions. A bridge for us. With that said, let us now turn to Micha and his journey to...
I'm kind of glad I muted my mic, because y'all would have heard me honk at Pole's comment here, where they said, you honestly find it hard to believe there won't be a new ending? You feel like Miyazaki's a troll? So I'll try to take my man at his word there, because it'll suck to start to doubt a lot of what Miyazaki says about the games. But yeah, I really wish that there was an actual extra ending to the game at some point, because I'm pretty dissatisfied with the base ones. But maybe the shadow of the Erdtree ending in and of itself will like make up for it somehow. And then asked, how do I feel about Smo's theory that the Greater Will is not an outer god and more like the world's creator? I don't necessarily know that I want to assign any kind of agency to the Greater Will. So if it kind of made the world by accident, that's one thing that I could probably be on board with. But nonetheless, I do kind of think it would be an integral force to the ordering of the world. But whether or not it actually created it, I feel like there's probably a lot of room to cast doubt on. Yeah, and as Galamoth said, the Ringed City didn't have a proper ending, but it was still a fitting conclusion to the Dark Souls series. Ding Dong had to replace your RAM recently. So the thing is, like earlier today, I had updated my integrated graphics card because I thought that would be the issue. But no, this seems to be entirely on YouTube's end, because I'm not dropping frames. Like it's good for the first 3 hours or so. It sucks. Maybe there's like this weird interaction between OBS and YouTube, because I never ever had any of this issue whenever I don't watch a video on stream. So, or maybe it's no, it shouldn't be the HDMI cables, but yeah. Hey Adrian, you said I should call the ISP. Sounds like they're throttling me after a certain amount of usage over time. You might be right, bro. It sucks. It's rough. My internet's not great anyway. I'm kind of considering switching. I mean, I've been considering switching. It's one thing to consider and then another thing to follow through, you know? Appreciate it though. Jackson says, I could just download the video file before. Yes and no. I mean, I potentially could, but that would also require me to get my act together to do that. And that's not going to happen. Yeah, I have at least a couple choices, but I mean, it's more like an oligopoly where they're pretty much all the same. They're just three companies in one trench coat, you know? All right. I tried to start the video, but it's not working.
Land of Shadow, as there were a few interesting details about Micha himself in the story trailer.
Nicola
As
and
is
narrator.
mentioned in the flavor text for the DLC, and was mentioned in the gameplay trailer for the DLC, Micha gave up his flesh to come here. And once again, the narrator hammers home this point that they gave up everything, their physical form and their gold, to come to the lands of shadow. And yet we are shown this very...
Man, come on, bro. The thing that annoys me the most is that not only is it buffering, but it's lying to me. It's saying like this much is done, but it isn't.
Very interesting image of what
Or
appears
maybe it
to be
is.
Micha in a
Or maybe it's not. All right, we're gonna go theater mode. Or not. We only had 5 minutes left, which means an hour worth of content, but... Why, YouTube? Yeah, it's almost like they're throttling my download speed, because I haven't dropped any frames or anything. I can do other stuff.
trailer. As is mentioned in the flavor text for the DLC.
Why does it keep going to auto?
In the gameplay trailer for the DLC.
I think it gets into this loop where it thinks it's on auto quality, and so it's like going to the highest to like the middle to the highest, like cycling, and it just gets stuck. This is unacceptable, man.
See, Micha gave up his flesh to come here. And once again, the narrator hammers home this point that they gave up everything, their physical form and their gold, to come to the lands of shadow. And yet we are shown this very interesting image of what appears to be Micha in a purple hue, making us think of St. Trina. For those familiar with my channel,
I just forgot the subtitles. My fault, guys.
You'll know that I certainly believe that Micha is St. Trina, and thus I'm utterly intrigued as to what we're seeing here and what it means.
So I can't see Michela's eye, but I was going to check to see if these statues had the, you know, seal looking like thing. Man, I really don't want to call it here, but this is kind of getting insufferable.
For the DLC.
This is so stupid. Like it's one thing if I'm getting throttled, but it's constantly also having to go between full screen to like regular screen to full screen to like make it go. So that makes me think it's not the internet. It has to be part YouTube somewhere, right? Try original small screen. It's nonsense. Not what you're suggesting, just like what I have to deal with. Yeah, as Paul asks, Micha, so Smotown uses like the auto-generated captions, so you get some really interesting captions, especially with his Scottish accent for the AI to figure out. Okay, Jesus.
Trailer, we also saw some things that well could be an allusion to St. Trina, mainly an unknown character sleeping repose among what appears to be St. Trina lilies. The imagery of St. Trina here is very interesting, as if she is falling through the void or something. I like the suggestion by Twitter user Manus that in the process of separating his spirit from his body, Micha actually...
What a username, Glowmide Queen at Manus. They're going all in on that Elden Ring content right there.
At least, the St. Trina persona is their own separate entity. St. Trina could be to Micha what Radigan is to Marek.
Ding Dong says auto-generated captions are wild on Aussie New Zealand speaker voices. You know, I don't really think I've seen or watched Lance McDonald stuff on stream. I might have to check out the captions on his stuff. Although he doesn't really talk a lot when I think about it. Alright, guys. I feel like YouTube is conspiring against the end of this video and this stream here. Alright, yeah, so All right, this is kind of unbearable. I am going to probably just end it here because we're not really getting anywhere, and it sucks to have Smotown's stuff get started and stopped over and over and over. So, all right, I will continue to stall a little bit on time, but I do want to thank everybody for dropping in the streams as always. I appreciate it. I go live pretty much every day at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's the plan for tomorrow and the day after, which will be Memorial Day in the States. Doesn't bother. Well, actually, okay, so I might have some issues streaming if some people are firing off fireworks like assholes, because I have a dog who gets like really, really anxious about fireworks, and he's like tries to climb up my body. So I typically kind of have to like stop what I'm doing and like lie down with him. And I tend to read when that happens, which isn't that big of a deal, except for pretty much like the entirety of frickin' July. Anyway, so the plan is to still stream tomorrow and Memorial Day, but if stuff happens Memorial Day, there might be some complications, and we'll just kind of deal with them as they arise. So, sorry, Smo, that I couldn't get through the rest of your video here. It sucks, but, it's YouTube. My apologies. So, all right, everybody. That'll be it for tonight's stream. Thanks for joining in. Levo, thanks for your video. Thanks for the 10 channel memberships that were gifted. I definitely appreciate that. And take care. Last Protagonist out.